Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone. Hello, world. And I'm very glad to welcome you to this special, very special broadcast. Today, we are going to have Alison McDowell. Just give me a second. I want to check the sound. Just give me one moment, please. Just want to verify.
Give me a second.
Yes, everything is good. It's working. Thank you. So, we're going to have a special guest today. Her name is Alison McDowell, and I've contacted her a couple of months ago, I think, about. We had a long chat, and I came across a presentation by her regarding what's going on at the moment in the world in this crazy time we live in. And I fixed a day to have this talk with her, but it didn't happen. And since then, she did a few more presentations. I just put a link here to share, all right? So you can share it. Soon, Alison will join us. No worries. And if someone is looking for me on my phone, I'm not available. Yes, excellent. So Alison will basically share with us very, very special and precious information, which is not normally available around the internet. And if it does, you have to pick it, really, really pick it carefully in various places and various websites and research centers, etc. And Alison have done exactly this work. So just give me, again, 1 second. I want to share this link. All right, just I want to share it a couple of more times where I can. They blocked me. YouTube, obviously, have closed down my main channel. So I'm broadcasting now. Where is it? Yes, I'm broadcasting now over 2 alternative YouTube channels, and on my live channel, a new one, which is on my personal server. So just give me 1 second. I want to share it. Yes. All right. I'm going to send an invite to Alison so she can join us. Yes, it's going to be extraordinary, just so you know, really special information. And the reason it's not in Hebrew, because my guest speaks English. Surprise, surprise. Most people in the world do speak English. I mean, not most maybe, but many people around the world speak English. And my guest today, she does speak English. The presentation today is called Tikkun Olam, Social Finance in Israel. And Alison is going to open this very small window into a world which we are not aware of. And I'm emphasizing this. Even people who are deeply aware of the rabbit hole and its path, deeply aware of the conspiracies, or not conspiracies anymore because it's all quite revealed nowadays, deeply aware of what is going on, they're going to be surprised from the information Alison is going to share with us. 1 second. Yes, I've sent the link to Alison. I'm just waiting for her to connect. And once she does, you will see her. I have her presentation here ready. All the slides are here ready. And I have all the have all the notes from Facebook that I'm blocked. Oh, please don't block me, please. Please, Facebook. Please. Oh, you're such a good national socialist, Facebook. So I'm just removing extra channels of Facebook, which I don't need. Here is Alison.
Sorry.
Hello, Alison. How you doing, darling?
I'm good. I was up too late last night. I had to get my coffee.
All right.
My bedroom studio.
I'm having mine as well. I just did a short intro into your presentation and into your talk, and I've added your channel link in the description of this broadcast. All right. So
okay, that's great. You could also, if you wanted to later, add my YouTube channel. If you just look up my name, Alison McDowell YouTube, it comes up. I have some things, but then most of these interviews that end up on YouTube, I add to like a playlist. So some people prefer just to listen to me talk.
All right. And just to say, I've till now, I've seen, I think, 4 or 5 presentations by you, just so you know. And this is besides the small clips of Nomi Klein talk.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking proper presentation. So thank you for everything. And you know, people asking me why it's in Hebrew, why it's in English, and I'm like, because my guest speaks English, and rightly so, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do all the amazing research you've done. So thank you for that. And I'm thanking you because I know the effort and the precious knowledge you're going to share with us. Most people are not aware of it, so they cannot even say thank you, but I already thank you in advance, and I think you know it. So I have the presentation ready here, but I think before we dive into it,
okay,
can you just give us, you know, just so the people get to know you, because you're not like a world-known researcher or anything, and you just started recently to discover these sort of things, although I know you've researched other stuff like cooperation and education in the last 5 or 6 years. So if you can just give us an intro about who are you, Alison McDowell?
Okay, so I'm based in Philadelphia. I describe myself as a mom and an independent researcher. I started out, as you had said, in education activism. My academic training, such as it is actually, it's a little unusual. It's in art history and then historic preservation and cultural landscapes. So in some ways, a lot of the tools that I use are these maps that I make that show relationships. And the city, I mean, Philadelphia, it's a major American city. It's a predominantly Black city, and it's a poor city. And we're also home to the University of Pennsylvania, among other academic institutions, and the Wharton Business School. So they sort of develop innovative financial products, shall we say, and then we're sort of a target because we're a poor city that's surrounded by very affluent communities that have ties to these venture capital firms and biotech firms and other sort of corporate entities that for which we are a resource. Our schools are a resource. Our healthcare systems are a resource in this new sort of biocapitalist program that I'm going to talk about. Sort of stakeholder capitalism was developed here. So there are things that I research that then it's because I see them, and then they have global implications, because right now we're clearly in a world that runs on the cloud. I mean, you know, Israel is the startup nation. You guys know what it is to be like in a sort of small geographic area, but have very global influence. And I feel the same way with Philadelphia. So like I said, my training is in like primary research in totally other fields, but I have come by trying to peel back the onion on what was happening in our school system. I realized that it was about data mining children for profit, not just to sell software, not just to sell hardware, but to actually use these predictive analytics in ways that will, moving forward, inform sort of dynamic financial debt products and hedge funds. And it's linked to something called stakeholder capitalism or social impact investing, social entrepreneurship. It's framed in very progressive language. But now, in my mind, with the new wearable technology, sort of data surveillance world that we're entering, these programs that sound on the surface to be, you know, possibly helpful, are actually creating a global markets in managed poverty and surveillance.
That's
So yeah,
something, just to say, that's something me, but I think also all the audience would like to know better. I know you're going to speak about it now, but it's quite tricky to get my head around it, if you know what I mean. And it seems that you do know what you're talking about. So it will be great if you can take us step by step into this, I would say, new world, sort of, if to use this phrase, that the globalists are, they'd like to take us to, against our will, one might add, you know.
I think we don't have informed consent of what's happening. People don't understand the bigger picture. I think if they knew, there would be more resistance.
And also the change from this, the economic model we have now, we live according to now, and they want to change into another model. And this something that, again, I'd like to know more about, because most people, they talk about the vaccines, they talk about the 5G, they talk about, and me too, yes, don't get me wrong, they talk about all these sidetracks they're taking us to, when actually they are changing the economical model, and they're going to change our life, and we don't even know one thing about it, especially not in Israel, although, as far as I understand now, Israel is among the leading forces of this change. I mean, maybe it's not the only leading force, but there are more. But you're going to tell us about it right now. I mean, it's fascinating just to think. Have you seen the link I've sent you today? The 8200.
Oh, yeah, I have that in my slide deck.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I just sent you the link. I mean,
I have
wow, it's mind blowing. I mean, just, you know, I publish it. Sorry, I'm going to shut up.
You're hyping me up here. This is going to be hard to live up to.
It's just, I tell you, I've seen this website, the 8200 Impact, and I'm like, wow, they're using all the features and softwares and things they've developed in the army to be used as if against terrorists. And these things are going to be used now against us. And people in Israel who may have served in this unit, may have a brother or a sister or an uncle or a cousin who are serving now in this unit, they are not aware of this. And this is an entrepreneur website. This is not an army website. This is a website to connect to donors and partners. And it's like, whoa, but I will let you, please, I'm going to shut up now. I want to hear you. Sorry, Alison, go on.
It's good. Well, so I would just say my perspective is from, I come from sort of a historical perspective, because I think that understanding the historical patterns allows you to make sense of what's happening now. That what is the break that is happening is a transformation, but it's not a totally new system. And in many ways, I trace this back, again, it's being someone who is in the United States. Much of the resources that our nation attained its strength on, its wealth and its power, were built on finance related to enslaved people, and on broken treaties related to agreements around land, so land and bodies. And a lot of this was done under the umbrella of a papal bull called the Doctrine of Discovery, you know, that goes back over 400 years. So, and that papal bull was sort of like, if you have someone, you know, you're exploring, it's the advent of the maritime trading, and you find people who are not Christian, that they can just be assets, they're resources that you can take them on behalf of God, you know, essentially. And so, and that intersected with the rise of double entry bookkeeping, at least in Europe. I'm sure it had probably been developed, you know, in Africa earlier, but the popularization of the double entry bookkeeping was really integral to the maritime trade, including the trade of human bodies. And so now what we're looking at, that the accounting system has always been really closely connected to finance, and what's coming next in this new transformation of the internet into the internet of things, the internet of bodies, the internet of agreements, you know, essentially coding the world in sensor networks, and what you were saying, 8200 unit is their specialty is signals intelligence. It's about electrical engineering, electrical signals, and making sense of them and making predictions about them. So this blockchain, which is a cryptographic, decentralized, essentially an accounting ledger, but not just of currency, but of any sort of item that can be represented as a digital asset. On these ledgers, that's what's coming next. So I want to open my remarks in framing it that my lens is that this is something about profiting off of the life force of others and the ways in which we create new tools to enable that. And that the tools that are coming that are very significant to understand is that it's going to be these digital identity systems that are attached to blockchain. And it's so much more complex than just like the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, which is what people are thinking about. So let me see. So I can share my screen. Let me see how that goes.
You can share your screen, or I can share the slides from here, as you like. You can share your screen.
Let me see if I can share it, because then I can point things out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just share it, and I will approve it from my side. No worries.
And your entire screen. I'm trying to.
You can share just a window, just a tab, if you like. You see, if you press the share.
Okay, wait a minute.
Sure.
Share. I'm pressing share and it's not coming up. Let me see. Maybe. Oh, there. A file.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I got it. I got it.
Okay. So I wanted to start out with Tikkun Olam, because again, I'm new to all of this. I don't have a deep dive in Israel specifically, but I go broad. I have very broad. So essentially this concept of repairing the world, of the framing of the faith of doing the work to do work in service of others. This concept essentially has been picked up by these social impact investors with the intention of using this branding to bring in sort of this larger system of technological management of society. And it's very much built on the idea that for the past several decades, Israel has had quite success in startups. And that, again, goes back to the fact that with, military service throughout, my understanding, I guess, is everyone in Israel. I don't know that part, but that people can be screened, the best and brightest, for their mathematics abilities, for their abilities in the technical arts, to be trained within the government. And then after their commitment of that are often sent out into the world and given considerable financial support in starting businesses that then allow them to leverage that training into new corporations that financially benefit themselves, and the state of Israel. So that has been the trajectory for the last several decades. And that is why Israel is such a powerhouse, but also as a small geographic area, there are many connections to many different countries, because that is for economic reasons, to grow those businesses, right? Because there's a finite number of markets within the state of Israel. So in the United States, there are these bird arrangements with many economic collaborations between, Boston, Texas, Florida, Rhode Island, these different states that allow these economic flows. So it's very networked globally. So now, we've got all of this tech, but now you need new markets and how to use it. And
sorry, Alison, I want people to realize and understand and see it also, because you're going to speak about Israel and some Israeli market forces and various things that are involved Israel. And what I would like to differentiate now, just for you and the rest of the audience, is what you're going to speak about. Although it's Israel, although it's some Israeli forces or some Jewish forces, I'd like to differentiate that these are not Jewish forces. These are Zionists forces. They are using the Jewish disguise and hiding behind, like they're using Tikkun Olam, all right? The phrase Tikkun Olam is being used to serve basically, the way I understand it, to serve evil, how to enslave people, not how to free people. Now, the Jewish people, they don't do this, but the Erev Rav, which is the, I would say, the Trojan horse, the Trojan horse, inside the state of Israel and inside the people of Israel, they're doing that. The majority of the Jewish people, they have no clue about that. We're talking about the big money Zionist forces who are running stuff behind the scenes, and now it's definitely on the stage. So I just wanted to differentiate these between these two. Please go on. Sorry.
Right. No, I mean, it's an important distinction, because what I have come to learn through doing all of my mapping of these relationships is that many of the traditional understandings of, I mean, certainly geopolitics is a piece of this, but ultimately, as we sort of move towards a world managed by artificial intelligence with very great wealth inequality, and in a world in which debt, the companies that are built on finance and debt management, entities that are built on sort of military domination, and this is across many countries. And I had mentioned the doctrine of discovery earlier. Like, the Vatican Bank is a central player in this. So I'm not in this talk, I'm speaking about Israel because of your audience, but it is a global network of power and wealth. And that wealth, is seated in China. That wealth is seated in New York City and Boston. That wealth is seated in Tel Aviv, in London, in these different places. And so I'm here to try to speak to people because I come at this as a mom. I understand what we're actually up against and how serious it is, and that people don't understand the larger framing. And so I truly believe that people would rise up against this, not just in protection of their own little corner of the world, but of all of humanity, like as a sacred project, that our ability to be apart from enforced, coercive, technological colonization, essentially, is really vital. And so that's, just to be very clear, today I'm talking about largely the United States and Israel, but it's also very much connected to Beijing. It's running through the United Nations. It's running through the Swiss banking system. It's running through
exactly
centers of power, centers
Yes.
of power. So that's, I agree. That's important to understand moving forward. So let me just see. Okay, so I have limited artistic talent, but I've been trying to, in the past, make little videos to explain these to people. So this is from an earlier video. I made it about 3 years ago, but I thought it was useful to start out with, because many of the people who are also involved in these industries are trained in elite universities, in Oxford, in Harvard, in different places. And so in 2003, the Harvard Business Review said that this social impact investing, this new form of investing that focuses on managing people as a commodity, will be the new venture capital. So that is very significant, coming from the Harvard Business Review. And a thesis that I'm trying to sort of work through now, and I have a couple of pieces that I want to write about the content that I'm putting together today, but that is, as we enter the fourth industrial revolution, which is something that is coming out of Davos, is coming out of the World Economic Forum, but also in tandem with what's being portrayed as sustainable and green development through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are really about channeling global capital and wealth and power. They need a new model, because if these billionaires are building a world where they imagine they would really prefer not to share it with lots of people. They would really rather share it mostly with robots and some functionaries and people to feed their data systems. Once our work starts to be handed over to robots and algorithms, even service work and knowledge work, and the work that's left can be meted out by artificial intelligence as tasks or gig jobs with no security and race to the bottom wages, all of humanity is going to suffer. And so the idea for these individuals, if you have this twisted mindset, would be, well, as we're sort of clearing the decks on the world, how do we can make as much money as possible, and how do we maintain our control? And so I had been researching in connection to educational technology, this idea of digital government and e-government. And that has been really since the advent of the cloud-based computing growing. But now as the World Wide Web Consortium, among others, have developed these decentralized identities, they can essentially use your relationship to your government, and this is not just Israel, any government. So this e-government unit is the Israeli one, but there are at least currently 10 leading digital nations that are going all towards so-called transparent and accountable digital government. Once they can tie you into the government as a digital entity, as a digital twin, the goal is that they will outsource the social services that they would provide to you as a citizen as investment opportunities for these global financial interests. And they wouldn't just be in Israel, they would be from anywhere. We have a program, a pilot project in the United States in Connecticut that was providing social welfare services to women who had a substance use problem and were flagged for neglect, child neglect. And so what they did was they created an investment deal where entities could invest in a solution for these women who met these criteria for services. And then the women were essentially put under surveillance. They were asked to pee in a cup several times a week, and they were consulted on. But fundamentally, these women's the problem of these families was that they were mostly single parents who were making less than $10,000 a year in Connecticut, which is not sustainable. You can't raise a family on that amount of money. And the solutions were never actually going to fix their material problems, like to actually improve their physical situation. But if the metrics of their performance of peeing in a cup or doing the program improved as data on a dashboard, these investors got paid. And it turns out these women in Connecticut, among the investors were BNP Paribas Bank and QB, which is a French bank, and QBE Insurance, which is an Australian insurance company. So essentially, in this case, these women's misery was becoming an investment program for global capital, and that is already happening. So when we're talking about creating these securitized markets in privatized welfare, and I will get into that in more detail, but this idea that the government, and I'm sad to say this, but the state is in a position of especially with the economic devastation that is happening, of pushing people into reliance on the state as dependencies on the state. And then they will use the logic of this system, this very sick logic of the system, is that they will use those circumstances, package you as a debt product to global investors and hedge funds, which is pretty scary.
This is something that I don't completely understand. I hope I will understand as we go along. Sure.
I kind of have to frame it and then we say it again.
Sure,
right?
Sure. I know.
Laying out this idea that your government, your relationship to your government, and the services that you are entitled to through your government will become an investment market, and they will be tracking your behavior in smart environments, and that will influence the market operations. And
okay, I'll wait. I'll be patient. Go.
I'll do it, and then you can interrupt. But so it's important to understand, as I mentioned, like there are these webs of relationship, right? So I'm in Philadelphia. There are many connections between the University of Pennsylvania and Israel. Penn is always sending folks over to learn how to be the new tech startups, especially Wharton. There is a lot of fluidity. In August, and I have been meaning to write this webinar up for some time, but Gina Raimondo, who's the Democratic governor of Rhode Island, which is a tiny state, she has been courting Israeli tech, saying, come back to Rhode Island, come, and we have an innovation hub and we have biotech. And so last fall, she was making visits to Israel to cultivate business, to come to invest in Rhode Island. Well, so now COVID happens, and essentially they have made partnerships with the Israel's Ministry of Health and companies like Diagnostic Robotics to essentially sort of advise and inform on the reopen program for COVID in Rhode Island, which is very interesting. And they had a webinar in August that was not just about the services that the state of Israel could provide to Rhode Island in terms of COVID, but a much larger program of e-government development. And that it was based around Estonia. And Estonia is the model blockchain ledger-based government that these e-governments are modeling after. So in this hour-long webinar, there's all of this discussion about how not only will this digital management and sort of growth sector happen around COVID and health management systems, but that they're really trying to get many more systems online, including education and various credentialing and registries for Rhode Island, and that Israel is sort of advising on this because Israel is also one of these digital nations. So that's sort of the fluid section.
So in a way, if I understand correctly, Israel or Israel as a state is running the e-government plan or program of Rhode Island?
Well, they're advising on it, right? So they have, there are role models for this. And I will say that the larger conversation around digital government, a lot of it is coming out of New York University, Stern Business School. They have a government innovation lab, and they have a project called the Research Network on Opening Governance. And essentially it's about creating open data portals, datafying the government. And I think it's sold to citizens like, look how wonderful it is that we're being so open with our data. But realistically, individual regular people aren't in any position of really benefiting that much from municipal level government, data, especially if you're like a large city. The people who are benefiting from this open data are the companies who are using the data to build their apps and their own corporate wealth off of the public, the trough, right? Like we create all of the data, it's caught up in our municipal governments, and then corporations come in and use these data sets to then create platforms that they can then sell and make money for themselves. And I'm saying this as in Philadelphia, our open data government legislation was advanced by a gentleman who worked for the police department. He was trained in landscape architecture at Penn, and his focus was GIS, the Geographic Information System mapping software. So he got the city to adopt this open government platform. While he was working for the police department, he spun off his own company, and then he used that data to develop predictive policing software, a company to do that. This company was called Asavea, and the program was called Hunch Lab. So it was AI predictive analytics around policing that they then sold back to the city and to other cities that were targeting Black communities for policing. So what I'm saying is like the open data government idea, that it sounds really good that, the government is trying to be accountable to you. But really, if you understand that government data is a valuable resource, when you just sort of throw it open, essentially that means that these companies can use it to create products that may actually go counter to what the public good is. At least in my opinion, in the case with this predictive policing software. So I might let me see how this works and if this link works. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go in. So this is one of these little sys maps that I make. And just to give folks an overview in case, it's littlesys.org, it's crowdsourced software. Most all of this data I hand enter, and each of the dots or the lines is a link to a source URL. So you can go back and look at the primary source that it came from, and often I'll paste the content into the notes section. This map is showing this relationship of this pandemic webinar. Okay, so this is the webinar, and these orange is government in the way I use this system. Blue is people, black is corporations, gray is stuff that's sort of corporate but not exactly a corporation. Purple is nonprofits and think tanks, other institutions. And then I've been using red to sort of draw attention to different items. So normally in red, I'll pick a big red dot to start with to say like, this is the central feature of my map. But in this case, there were a number of things that I wanted to point out. So I made more red dots than I usually do. So we have the state of Rhode Island. We have Gina Raimondo, whose background is in venture capital and also in impact investing. And, you can see these are people of the world. She's at Harvard, she's at Oxford, she's at Yale. She's part of the global capitalist class. She was the treasurer for a while. So she was managing the investments of the pension funds, right? So she has these connections to pension funds. She has been working the state of Rhode Island with Harvard Kennedy School, which is doing technical assistance on these impact investing deals, because right now they're all mostly pilots. They have not yet scaled them. And so there are a number of pay for performance, pay for success, social impact bond programs happening in Rhode Island that I called out in red. So this is about pay for performance around education. And all of these require data, and they all depend on data analytics to justify the returns on investment. So that's why the kids have to be on screen school or doing online platforms. It's because they need the data. That's why you can't go to your doctor, that it has to be a telemedicine consult, because they need to capture the data. Rhode Island has a data hub that is connected to their Department of Education, their Department of Health, their Department of Higher Education, the Department of Children and Families, and Departments of Labor. And so it's important to understand in this construct that these folks who are investing in social impact these markets are running on poverty and misery. If you didn't have poverty, you wouldn't have impact investors, right? So they want maybe slightly reduced poverty and well-managed poverty, but they don't have any incentive on getting rid of poverty. And so as people are made sort of dependents on the state, I liken it to understanding what the United States did to the indigenous people, right? They pushed them off of their lands. They pushed them onto reservations. They made promises and that they did not fulfill. They separated families. They erased things that we are potentially facing in this post-COVID moment. If we become dependents on the state, and then they can use that, our lack of being economically independent, to then control us through how we access healthcare, how we access training and education, what our families' needs are, what our workforce options are. These are all impact markets that are subject to technological control systems. And it's not about getting people out of the control system. It is about managing them within it. So I want to make that very clear, especially the part about children and families, because I had mentioned about Connecticut. These individuals, like, there is money to be made in managing people in crisis. And especially, here we're seeing many people who are housing insecure, many people who are food insecure, but all of these people now have digital devices in their homes because the kids aren't going to school. And those are essentially surveillance devices, right? Like, you can see all what's, I'm tucked out here in my bedroom to give this presentation today, but is inviting the eye of the state, whatever that state may be, into your personal space to monitor you. And if there is an incentive to flag you, because by flagging you, they can put you into a stream that will create revenue for people who are already incredibly wealthy to run these data markets, they are going to do that. That is the logic of this market. It may not be something any one individual wants to have happen, but that I'm framing this as a machine. This is a machine that is running, that is reaching out to embrace every aspect of our lives. And that is how the markets are going to go. So within this conversation about Israel and Rhode Island and electronic government, we need to know that Gina Raimondo, the venture capitalist who was managing the treasury funds before becoming governor, who is connected in these global networks with individuals like Mark Zuckerberg, who's looking to remake their schools for quote unquote personalized learning, which is educational data mining, that all of these systems are connected when we talk about making it electronic government. And the other piece of this is about reskilling. And this, I had seen this coming for several years in the education space, but for this fourth industrial revolution is planned to run on artificial intelligence and automation and robotics and synthetic biology and quantum computing and Internet of Things. It's remaking the world moving from carbon to silicon, I guess, in some ways, right? Making everything into a digital version of itself. And that actually has to be created. And so the education system that we have always had has been meant to push children into the needs of the industrial sector, right? So that's why we moved when we moved, became a factory-based economy. We trained kids and we got them off the farm and we put them in factories. And then we became, a service sector job, and so the schools were trained kids to do that work. Well, the next work is essentially going to be building this, I call it a global digital prison, right? They need the coders. They need people to work with big pharma to do the synthetic biology. They need the people to do the rocketry. They need the people to do the cybersecurity, which is essentially a fundamentally military enterprise. And they have structured it so that they are going to make money on training the kids to do this work, not so that they'll have a really productive life and a well-paying job, but to be able to globally outsource this work so that they can compete in doing the coding, in doing the online, data analytics with every single other person in the world on blockchain through these blockchain transcripts, your lifelong learning records. And so it's like a race to the bottom in wages. But they will make money off of putting that system in place, which is really twisted. They will not only make money on the system itself, but actually the process of getting there. And that is what Skillful is part of. That is connected to the Markle Foundation. The Lumina Foundation for Education is a foundation that came out of Sally Mae, so educational debt. And what's coming is this idea of you will never stop, quote unquote, learning. You will always be having to earn a new skill or a new badge to try to get the next job because they will always be moving the bar. And so you will arrange for your training through something called an income sharing agreement, which is to essentially say that they will garnish your wages in perpetuity. You sign a contract and you agree to a future taking out of your wages if you meet the terms of the contract that go back to repay for your training cost and profit for the investor. This was coming out of Purdue University, but they have decided to be able to securitize this debt, this educational debt, and create giant new equity markets for the hedge funds. And the gentleman, and I'll show you this later, but who actually co-founded this Edley software platform to securitize the debt for financial markets. His name is Christopher Riccardi, and he was actually the grandfather of collateralized debt obligations, CDOs. And it was CDOs that crashed the global housing market. This is the same guy, right? So they've got this new version of how do we create new debt products to keep this fictitious capital program going and to keep everyone in line. And it will be done through our managing us as sort of livestock, digital livestock, both from our training standpoint and our health standpoint. So,
question, Alison.
Yeah. I know this is a lot.
No, sure. I mean, these people, these planners, do they want also to kill many people? I mean, how does this fit into the plan of this new capitalism?
So the way I understand it is that there are three primary sources of data collection to run these markets. There's the education and training one. There's one around supportive housing and food access, but adding sensors to all of that to track your behavior. Mm-hmm. And then there's healthcare. And so, I can't speak specifically, that the ejections have been rolling out, and clearly it seems like there are a number of substantial negative impacts, and we do not know what the long-term, no one has clearly tested this for the long-term negative effects. This whole program is based in eugenics. It's a eugenics. Literally, the plan under the Fourth Industrial Revolution is that we will no longer be natural human beings, that we will be subject to needing ongoing upgrades, the software of life. The Moderna vaccine, in fact, their website calls their mRNA platform the software of life, so that we will be dependent on outside systems, outside of our normal natural bodily function to survive. Possibly because the world that they're creating full of nanotech will require that, but they haven't told us that. So there's this cyborg element. I I can't speak to exactly how much depopulation is going on. I mean, I do think as a eugenics program, control over reproduction and control over the family is a central element of it. I will say they're not planning on pushing everybody out of the system, because clearly, their plan, or and there may be competing interests here. I'm not saying everyone is on exactly the same trajectory, but they are imagining to build a digitally simulated planet, and they need people to code that, and they want to make money making people do that work. So some of it will be people left to do that work. I will also say that these impact markets, one of the big cost offsets, and I'll talk about that, but that they're using is chronic illness. So they will both, I think the pharmaceutical companies and environmental contamination create chronic illness and economic circumstances that lead people to have to make choices that lead them to not have make the healthiest life choices, because sometimes it's economically impossible. Population health and social determinants of health are woven into the impact markets. That is a central feature. And I think it's important, like as I go forward, and maybe you can tell me a little bit more about this, but in Israel, because you have access to a state healthcare system, we don't in the United States. And people have been lobbying for a single payer through Medicaid. My gut is that once we get it, it will be tied in with what's called value-based payment and wearable technology. So we will essentially be paying off, our health outcomes by performing good health behaviors for the impact markets. And that will be all linked to the electronic health records.
Can you say, I mean, I've noticed this impact word, what it stands for? I mean, how can I understand? I know what impact is, but how can I understand the context of impact in this conversation?
Well, if you understand that their goal is both to digitally control as much of the world as possible. And this isn't something new. I mean, in many respects, there are a lot of people who know the history of technocracy or industrialization of society that goes back, at least to the late 19th, early 20th century of social engineering, right? Industrially engineering society. And then so you have the control mechanism of the industrial engineered society. And now the financial markets are creating profit centers of this engineering. The impact element, I believe, is that all of this is coming through signals intelligence and data analytics and predictive analytics. For these markets, for them to take their profit, and I'll go into that a little bit later, but they need to turn you into data, and then they need to make a prediction about how you will behave, whether that's how you will behave in a labor market context, in a healthcare context, in a nutrition context, and they will try to nudge your behavior and make you fulfill what they feel like you should do for their deal. Mm-hmm. And that is the impact. Then they would do a before and after. And it's really crazy. This will sound crazy, but this is my education background in this. When my child was in high school, in the public schools here, they had something called student learning objectives, SLOs, ironic, SLOs, right? These student learning objectives. And they were really stupid because it was all about data. And so they wanted to show quote unquote growth. You were supposed to show growth. So they would test kids on things that they had never learned and then test them later and say, look, they had growth. Well, that only really works if you're doing this for a financial market. If you didn't want to demoralize children, you wouldn't test them on something they didn't know, especially young kids. You wouldn't, but that's this gaming of the impact. What is the impact? Oh, you moved them from this metric on what they were supposed to know to this metric. And that is how the markets run. In their physical education class, they would time the kids with no training to run a mile, and then they would train for a couple months, and then they would time them again. That's the impact, right? And so essentially what this is about is reducing like a rich and complex and spiritual life into something that can be put on a data dashboard. And that is both for the dual purpose of controlling society as this new program of envisioning the world as a giant, militaristic video game rolls out, where people are, being made redundant by robots and people are dying and all of these crazy things are happening to keep people busy so that they can't actually get together and fight back. And then is to make markets to make money while you're doing it. It's those two things.
will it be true to say, and this is just because it's not easy to get my head around it, and I bet it's also true for most people who watch it, but it's fascinating and I want to know more and learn more. But will it be true to say that because they sort of ran out of resources to make money on, they established or they made up a new market, which is, it's not totally new because slaves and enslavement, I mean, they've done it for hundreds of years, if not more, but they kind of found a new type of model or invented a new type of model of digital enslavement and to suck life force and profit out of this area. Will it be true to say something like that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I encourage people, if you have access to it, there's a movie, I think I recommended it to you. It's called The Big Short.
Yes.
And it was made a number of years ago about the housing market crash.
Yes.
And it's very educational about how these hedge fund markets work. Because we have created a world that runs on debt and gambling. I mean, what this is essentially legalized gambling.
Yes.
And there's so much debt. It's like a giant Ponzi scheme. And they keep, it sort of falls apart and then they remake this into a new version. So in many respects, the last global economic crash destabilized people to create, to queue up these poverty markets, right? Many people living in poverty, much wealth inequality. And guess what? Bingo, now we have a new global game to make money off of poverty, right? We have a lot of poverty. We're going to make money off of this poverty. So the movie, the Big Short, and I have a clip a bit later, but if you understand that this idea of securitized debt being what you need to do to gamble, and the deals themselves that I'm going to talk about, the profit is not in the deal. There's a little bit of money to be made in the deal itself. The big money is on the securitization of the debt and what the hedge funds are going to do. If they don't have the deals, they don't have a game. And they need this game. They need this game. So they must set up the deals. So even if these deals don't make any sense, they need them to function. Even if the deals themselves are not terribly profitable, they need them because the hedge funds, that is the structure of the game. If the game doesn't exist, they don't have anywhere to put their bets. And with the concentration of wealth since the last crash in this past decade, it's only become more and more concentrated. And they have to keep their capital flowing. And the only construct of debt that is bigger than the housing market is people.
People, yes.
And so, and what that means is if you imagine the toxic bundled mortgages and how those were traded, the next iteration is portfolios bundled of human futures, So
the more people are poor, the more money the hedge funds are making.
Yeah, let me go to a few more slides. So
yes,
because what they do is hedge funds run on movement. They need constant movement because you're always placing bets. And so if the system slows down and stops, the bets, you can't keep placing the bets. So you need dynamic flows of information. And most of these hedge funds are run on artificial intelligence and gamification, and making these predictions. So they need a constant flow of data. They don't want people in their portfolios that are so broken they can't be fixed. If you're so broken that I can't prove that I impacted you, you're not very useful to me.
Right.
I don't want people that are pretty functional, but maybe could be a little improved. Because there's not a lot of profit in that either. If you're already pretty okay, tuning you up and optimizing you to make you a little bit better on the dashboard is not going to look that good. What they're looking for are people who have significant problems, but that they predict will respond well to some sort of cheap solution, at least as data, right? And none of this is real. We have to understand that this is all, the hedge funds are operating all on like a different layer of reality than it links to the physical material reality, but a lot of it is disconnected from reality. It's just these games and rules that they are playing, and they're making it up as they go along. So let me scooch back to my Okay, so this is my map structure, but you kind of get the sense. It's education, it's healthcare, it's housing, it's pension funds and impact investing, and it's global. Because like I said, Rhode Island is consulting with Israel on this, how to operate the government as a digital program, and they're all looking at Estonia, and blockchain is a central piece of that. So this is just a slide that's talking about the digital nations, and I can't count off all 10, but it's like Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, Estonia, Israel, Portugal, South Korea.
States?
Uruguay, I think, is very odd. I don't know why Uruguay is one. But those are, it's a lot of the colonies, really, in respect, like colonial powers, because I do think that the proper frame for this is colonialism and settler colonialism. And it's also places that these digital nations are the ones where we're seeing some of the most repressive lockdowns and COVID response, which is consistent.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I just want to hit on Estonia, because that was the model both that Israel is looking to, that Rhode Island was looking to. And it's interesting because this was rolled out, the prime minister of Estonia at the time that was really advancing this. And I can't remember his name right off the bat. I have all this information. Some of it I don't quite have at my disposal, but he actually grew up in northern New Jersey, right? The prime minister of Estonia. So this global influence zone, and like he's a professor, visiting at Stanford. So these you might see, oh, Estonia, it's this little country, it's way up there. No, it's part of this global grid, and in this cloud-based world, everything is really connected. And what they most like is to look for little out-of-the-way spots that they can go and like try things out and refine them and get them ready for prime time. And one of the
if I understand, just a quick question, Estonia is their model. Is it already there? I mean, is Estonia already connected? The people in Estonia are connected to blockchain. I mean, is it already running?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
because we don't know.
There's actually a good article in the New Yorker from like 3 years ago when I was first looking at this, called Estonia, the Blockchain Republic. And so it's a feature piece. And so it's quite long. So I would encourage, if people, can have access to the New Yorker, look up Estonia, the Digital Republic. And interesting, when I was reading this, and at this point, I was just looking at education technology. Like I thought I was fighting school closures. I was not only, the door was just opening for me on how big this actually was. And I'm reading this article about in the New Yorker, and it's talking about Tim Draper of Draper Kaplan Richards, and he's a free market guy and with online education and training. And I'm like, why is Tim Draper in Estonia? Like, what's going on with Tim Draper in Estonia? Well, this was an interview that he had when essentially this is about global free market flows, but the free market is not. These free markets are not really free. Like, they're not really preferencing the little guy. They're preferencing the Amazons, of the world. And Tim Draper had an interview, written interview about Estonia, and this quote is from him. And in this, he's actually positing the idea that we might not even need a physical country. And that you can become an e-resident, a digital resident of Estonia. You can pay your taxes through Estonia. You can get your certification for your job credentials through Estonia. You can be an e-resident in Estonia, even if you do not physically reside there.
Which is one step closer to one world government. I mean,
yeah. And what I'm trying to say too within COVID is, once you understand geofencing, imagine these electronic dog fences, or the way you do free range livestock management with Internet of Things, right? They can use satellite systems to create real-time borders wherever they want. If by crossing a border, and maybe it doesn't zap you with a dog collar or something, but maybe if you have your digital device that is your wallet, because all of your money is on your phone, they say, oh, you can only go 5 miles from your house. If you go past 5 miles from your house, we wipe your phone. Or we wipe all the public benefits on your phone. Oh no, you can't leave your house. If you cross your threshold, we do. The idea of a border, of the geopolitics of it is shifting. And I think most people are not even aware that this is a thing.
Sure. I know a friend of mine, which he has a channel here in Israel. He has done one broadcast speaking about, I'm telling this to the Israelis here, speaking about geofencing, that the Israeli government has passed like new regulations regarding geofencing using specific frequencies just for geofencing. Now, most people are not aware what it is even. I mean, the phrase is like new, but when you go into it, you understand the groundwork, the foundations have already been laid out for these sort of things to happen. So the infrastructure of hardware and software are already here to do to accomplish their plans. So it's not it's familiar. What you're saying is absolutely, it makes sense, and it's familiar because I know about it here in Israel.
Well, and I just want to say, like, I think, we've come to depend. I mean, clearly we're depending on this device. Like we're doing this on a device now, right? But the devices are learning us, right? The devices are watching us now with machine vision and behavioral analytics, affectiva, emotion sensing software, keystroke, software. They can tell and make predictions about this, right? And then this can then translate into our physical environment. And so one of the things I was trying to talk with, there were some folks in New York City who were protesting opening the schools. And they said, we want to do school online. And and this person's Twitter profile, like the way they were representing themselves was that their image was a young Black teen carrying a box that was prominently branded for Hewlett Packard, right? HP. And Hewlett Packard has been central to both using the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation to remake the nonprofit sector to be data-driven, so to serve this program that is rolling out. They are very much involved in data analytics around human resources. And in fact, their company would have equations that would calculate your flight risk. Like if you were a quality employee that they wanted to keep, they would figure out like what was the minimum amount of raise they could offer you without you leaving their company. And they were very proud of like refining these technologies that they could profile their own employees. And so they're working with something called Yet Analytics, which is based in Baltimore. It is a spinoff from folks who were Johns Hopkins alumni. I feel pretty sure that must be some larger state surveillance elements in there about human capital analytics and data capture for online learning.
I can add
these artificial intelligence brains that are predicting. So I guess all of this is to say Hewlett Packard is also a central presence in managing borders, right? In managing the borders in Israel, right? So what I was trying to tell this woman is that even though she feels like she's protecting low-income students in Harlem from some perceived threat, that having these Hewlett Packard devices in their homes, the homes of poor families, gathering all of this information, knowing that that Hewlett Packard itself is setting up human capital markets, knowing that it is tracking your use of online learning resources, knowing that it's involved in border control and facial recognition and biometric control systems. Once you put all of those dots together, you realize that the road we're going down is a very dangerous road. And these entities have no real allegiance to their people. Like these are transnational companies. Like to whom does IBM belong exactly, right? It's not, IBM is everywhere. So they are not going to look after your well-being. And that's what I'm trying to say is as we think about these e-governments is that, and we talk about, I'm not a nationalist. I think in many respects, this proves to me that we need to have global solidarity to fight the globalists. The answer isn't that there are no borders for capital. The borders are for people, and the border could be your front door tomorrow. And these borders are run from space, and the satellite systems, at least in the US, they came out like the head of NASA was Werner von Braun and he was Operation Paperclip, right? Yeah. So if the global digital jail is going to be run by the Nazis, we have to reckon with that. That's a history, and there's really profound consequences.
And just to add that Hewlett Packard, they have, one scientist from there, he wrote down the first patent for 5G. And also the company, HP, is deeply involved with Qualcomm, the Israeli company, which manufactured at least some of the 5G chips or whatever. I'm not that aware. I'm not too much information on that side, but I do know that HP and Qualcomm work together. And actually, the first patent on 5G was registered by a scientist from HP. And this was discovered by researcher Dean Henderson from the States, which I've interviewed, I don't know, 8, 9, or 10 times. So I can put you in touch with him just so you can maybe make some more links.
I did not know that Qualcomm was Israeli. Okay.
Oh, yes. I mean, obviously, there's some other hands involved in Qualcomm, but Qualcomm is, as far as I know, it's Israeli company.
Okay, interesting. Well, so this brings me to this image. I don't know if you know what this is.
Yes.
So this is Cornell Technion. Technion, is that how you say it? Technion?
Yes, Technion, but you can say Technion, yes.
Okay, so this is Roosevelt Island in the East River in New York. It was remade as a campus for, essentially they created a campus for innovative data development. And this was a project initiative that was spearheaded by Michael Bloomberg when he was mayor of New York City. And again, much of he is one of the primary impact investors and is very much about sort of social prescribing, social determinants of health, and ed tech. So his hands are in all of this in Bloomberg Philanthropies and What Works Government. So this is the campus itself. It's not very big. I mean, it's about 5 buildings at this point. I'm assuming that they're going to expand, but Qualcomm is one of the major funders of this campus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And and Siegel, which is one of the Two Sigma, which is one of these major hedge funds. And Google provided technical assistance while this was getting off of the ground. So there was supposedly a competition for, who would win this space on Roosevelt Island, and Cornell Tech won out. But housed, or affiliated within this university system, is something called the Small Data Lab. And the Small Data Lab, and I had been looking at it several years ago, not fully appreciating why health data analytics were so important, because at that time I was really focused on education and education data. They were looking at the idea of using data dust, like all the little bits and pieces of information that you throw off and will throw off, especially in a 5G environment, to make predictions and shape behaviors with digital nudges. So it's very important to know that there are 2 individuals that are connected with Cornell Tech that are also on the board, and one of whom is the architect of the Common Pass. And that's going to be this pass, program, the Health Pass, biometric health passports that are coming. That is a project of the Rockefeller Foundation and the World Economic Forum. But this is kind of an amazing picture, because I want to point out, this is the campus here. And I actually went 2 summers ago. I was presenting at the Left Forum in Brooklyn, and something called me, and they said, I need to get on the subway and go to see this place, to actually see it, because I'm a cultural landscape person, right? I mean, I like to see how it lays on the land. And so I went, and it was summer, so there were not many people there, but I walked through, and there's this very strange sort of sculptural hill section. I'm assuming that's for expansion. But this little area here, not quite at the tip, is actually a state park. This is a state park at the end, and it's the ruin of a hospital, a smallpox hospital. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
It's a pandemic smallpox hospital ruin. And then at the very end, at this tip, is the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the FDR Park. And then this park is actually right overlooking the United Nations.
Well,
so you've got the United Nations, you've got FDR, and essentially what we're looking at now is, I think he died before it was fully implemented, but sort of advancing the Bretton Woods, arrangement and the IMF and these global financial structures. And now, as you said, we're facing this new global economic system, a digital economy, a globalized new world order economy. They are, and this is, coming out, this Bretton Woods 2. Right now, we're going to have a Bretton Woods 2, and it will be alignment with stakeholder capitalism. And I think it is very symbolic that how this is being laid out, that the people doing Common Pass, that the people doing 5G, that the people doing health data analytics are connected in through this ostensible former pandemic hospital situation, and FDR and the New World Deal and the UN. I mean, it's really too perfect how it's all laid out there.
Yes.
So anyway, so this just sort of clarifies it. This shows you, how this is all pointed out. These are the donors. So Google helps support this, but Qualcomm. So Erwin Mark Jacobs, Qualcomm co-founder, he gave $133 million in 2013 to this project, and then Qualcomm itself gave. Or maybe these, I don't know if they gave individual gifts or maybe this is the same gift, but Bloomberg, and then Tata, because, a big piece of this, when you talk about lockdowns and being something very significant, India is a huge player in all of this. And Bloomberg is also in India and pushing smart cities. And essentially, they have such a large population. And the goal is to sort of jump all of those folks into the digital economy and to get those folks to code this digital prison.
One thing to add, Alison, again, I don't know if you know that, but roughly a year ago, I guess more, a year and a half ago, I've interviewed James Corbett, which is a independent journalist. I think he lives in Japan. And anyway, I've interviewed him about a show he has done, about the research he has done about India, and who else but Bill Gates, who was deeply involved in changing the cash system in India into a digital system.
Yeah.
And this happened roughly 6 years ago or something like that. I don't remember exactly the time. And I'm not surprised that India is deeply involved here because the groundwork, the foundations have already been laid out some years back, thanks to Bill Gates and his mates. Go on.
Yeah, and also Pierre Omidyar is a big player from eBay. We need more people need to know about what Pierre is up to. But I will say the other piece is the Siegel Family Endowment. Sorry, I don't know why that. Oh shoot. David Siegel is with 2 Sigma, which is this hedge fund that I was talking about. So it's very important to understand the connection of all of this to the hedge funds, which is something that I feel like I bring to the conversation that people haven't really surfaced in a way that I think needs to be surfaced, that this is not just about surveillance. It's not just about making money off our data, but it's actually about hedging, about creating derivatives markets to legitimize the surveillance and bet on our lives. So this is JP Pollock. He actually is creating the Common Pass. He was one of the architectures of the Common Pass, and he is based out of Cornell Tech, and he has developed essentially WellCoin, a health currency, right? So this new world that we're moving in, being wards of the state, is that we will have to earn our access to live, not in any normal kind of fiat currency, but in tokens on blockchain that would unlock, almost like, a vending machine, right? Like you have to, it's like all of this is like putting us in a behaviorist Skinner box and then making us, conform. And many of these things might be lovely. These might be, it might be wonderful to walk and ride your bikes and eat organic kale and do all these things. But if someone is saying you have to do this because otherwise your family is going to starve and we're making money off of it, it's a very treacherous program. Yeah. The other woman who's connected to Cornell Tech, who's very important, her name is Deborah Estrin. She runs the Small Data Lab that I had mentioned. And so they're all about sort of creating value off of this data dust that you generate and creating digital nudges. She had formerly been at UCLA, and she was the chair of this DARPA-funded sort of committee effort that came out of the National Research Council. So they do these white papers, these think tanks, they get together and they sort of do foresight projects about what they imagine. And this was in 2001. So it's called Embedded Everywhere, an agenda for networked of embedded computers. So this is the Internet of Things. This is the early Internet of Things coming online. And you, and then here's Deborah Estrin, and she is chair of that. Let's see, there's 12. I'm trying to think who else is in here. But it's very important to understand that it goes way back. And this was funded by DARPA. So sort of, Advanced Research Projects Agency, sort of the mad scientist of the US military.
Sure.
And this is just a quote that I put out. This is from the report, page 174. It's a long report. And I can, share the slides with you so people can look it up if they want. But essentially in 2001, they are already imagining a world where sensors are embedded in our environment, that our activities will be recorded and affected by the computing system in all spheres of life, and that we will have smart dust and swallowable health monitors and automated buildings.
Whoa.
So, that's pretty intense. Like 2001, there were some folks around who knew what they were building. And no one bothered to ask, I think, the world to say, like, hey, do you want to live in a world that is run on smart dust by the military? And I think the thing that's so difficult is a lot of this stuff is fun. It's sold to us. It's enjoyable. It's sold to us as convenience. Yeah. It's not sold to us as military surveillance. It's not sold to us saying, you take this now, but 10 years from now, this is your jail. We will own you through this. And essentially, we've made a global economy like where many of our kids work in this, right? Our relatives, people we care about, and they're not bad people. I'm not saying that everyone involved in this is bad, but they're not given the full picture. They're just given a job to do, and they're given an app to create. And they don't say, oh, by the way, this is where this piece fits into this larger puzzle. And I went to Tulsa in January to present, because Tulsa is a test bed for a lot of this. And it's essentially, Tulsa is run by George Kaiser and the Schustermans, both of whom have, very strong Zionist ties. And Tulsa is being remade over as a cyber warfare security program. And they are using the Black community to test their surveillance play tables for toddlers in Head Start programs. And it's a test bed for all of this. And, I went down there to talk to people about it and to tell them what was happening. And it was a very small group, but they had some folks there who were recording me for the community. And it turns out they were techies, and they had coded this app for court appearances, right? It was an app to help give people services to make sure that they made their court appearance. And I'm looking, and they said, well, we've coded this app for free, and then this company stole it, and now they're selling it. And I said, why did you code the court appearance app? Like, that actually isn't helping poor people. That's just sustaining a system of state control where they're profiting off poor people. Now they have a new profit center, which is, apps to give you a ride share and childcare to your court appearance. Like, we should be looking at the structure. And so they're not bad people. They're nice people. But if we want to back out of this, we're going to have to try to figure out how to do that in a way that all of the people whose livelihoods and whose skills and talents are embedded in censor environments, how do we dial that back? So this is the Commons Project. This is what Estrin and Pollock are involved with. Their global board came online in July. They have over 60 board members last time I checked, all around the world. So it's a fully global project. It's funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. We have to understand that clearly Rockefellers, have been about, killing off holistic medicine and doing eugenics programs for a very long time under the framework of the common good. And this piece, the Common Pass, a lot of people are familiar with, because this is what they're talking about with the airport in Heathrow about requiring these, vaccine status or health status passports on your phone. But they're not actually telling you, this has been out for months. The press and, even alternative press are not talking about this COVID check, which is about employment and accessing education. So this is not just about flying, doing getting on an airplane. It's about going to school. It's about going to work. And then this health app ties very much, you can see Cornell Tech right there. The health app is about health data analytics in real time. And I think, a lot of us, if you checked your smartphone, that there's health apps embedded in that phone that you didn't ask for and that you can't take off. And these phones are actually collecting a lot of biometric data on you as we speak. So this is what they're up to. And all of this needs to be understood, again, within the context of the censor networks of state surveillance. And it may not be popular, but I highly recommend Yasha Levine's book, Surveillance Valley. It's a military history of the internet. And especially once we talk about cloud computing, like who runs the cloud. It's a limited number of people. It's not a very diverse group of people who run these cloud systems, and they are fundamentally militarized. They may be fun. They may have fun video games. They may help you send your email and do these PowerPoints, but it's military. This is a military construct. And it's really important because Bloomberg is central to all of this, and he is doing work in Israel right now with this What Works government, is that he had teamed with Microsoft early on to create this domain awareness system, which is unified camera networks all throughout New York of doing this sort of remote predictive policing. And within the sort of central area of the domain awareness system, which was done in collaboration with Microsoft. And it's important to understand Microsoft, a lot of the technologies that they have developed, they use their gaming technologies, their Xbox technologies. There's something called Kinect. It's motion capture, like skeletal capture, so that like when you're gaming with your Xbox and your haptics, like you're training data, like you're creating value for their company in essentially being able to use those technologies, those refined technologies out in the real world so that they can track your gait and analytics, your facial recognition, how you move in space within a policing system, a predictive policing system that is increasingly linked to autonomous robotics and drones. So there's Bloomberg. He along with NYU, they have this What Works government program. They're doing essentially sort of best practice, and they are controlling the mayors of many mid-sized cities in the United States. They bring them to Harvard Kennedy School. They give them a training. They do turnaround trainings. They bring in higher municipal officials to do innovation government. This is not just in the US. This is all throughout Europe and India and now in Israel. And it's being done through the Perez Center for Peace and Innovation.
Of course.
So, I'm going to just have a sip of coffee. Do you have some thoughts, or I have a lot more to go if you're up for it?
Well, for example, Perez, he's not with us anymore. He died last year or a couple of years ago. I don't know when. But Perez has been deeply involved in all this New World Order crap for decades. He was one of the main engines here in Israel, and he has had contacts all over the world, very close with the Vatican, very close in England with the Queen, very close in New York. And really, I never liked him. Many people never liked him. And now we know even better why we didn't like him. And there's many other characters which I think nowadays their plans and their scams are coming up to the surface for us to see. Again, for those who would like to see. Most people still don't want to see. They just want the vaccine and leave us alone. But it's not that simple, as we know, and it's not going to be that easy, as we know. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I want to talk about, there is so much, there's this money, right? And some of it is in Swiss bank accounts, some of it is in New York, some of it is in Israel. This is based on capitalism expanding, right? Capitalism has to keep expanding. It has to keep growing. We have a world of finite resources. Essentially, what's happening is that capital is moving into the virtual world, right? And so Microsoft acquiring LinkedIn, which is these badging for, the next globalization 4.0, buying gaming, the gaming worlds. It is these digital worlds that they will continue to grow their profit in by turning us into digital representations and avatars, and then mining us for data and profit in virtual space. And so, I just want to sort of re-emphasize that no place is off limits to this machine. This is connected to, the people of Israel will be investable commodities, and the people investing in you may be, SoftBank, out of Japan, or Alibaba, out of China. Anybody can invest in you. And, people know that if you have a mortgage, I don't know how it works here, but here, you buy property, you put a mortgage, within a week, that mortgage is sold off to some other random company, right? Yeah. That debt that is connected to this building that you live in, but it's all floating around in the world that is both intimately connected with you, but also disconnected. It's abstracted in this financial market space. And imagine that, but now with children, with the elderly, with people involved in the judicial system, with people who are, refugees. These are all of the things that are going to be mined for profit. And one of the central individuals to this larger program, his name is Sir Ronald Cohen. He he was born in Egypt, but then fled in the 50s, and his family. So he grew up in the United Kingdom. He is known. He got his MBA from Harvard Business School. Okay, so he's trained. He's part of the elite network, and he is known as the father of British venture capital. Okay, and he was tapped to essentially begin to scale these impact markets. And I will mention earlier, the concept of an outcomes-based government contract, a pay-for-performance government contract, goes way back to at least the mid-90s. And that was in the United States. This team of Steve Rothschild, who was a former executive for General Mills of all things, but a Rothschild, I don't know, like how, it's just a coincidence that his last name is Rothschild, and Art Rolnick, who was a head economist at the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. And so they framed up for Minnesota this idea of performance-based contracts, but the technology wasn't there to scale them or automate them. And then by the early 2000s, that technology, the cloud computing, was coming up to speed. And so what Cohen was tapped to do was essentially use what's called big society capital and then later, I think, the lottery fund, this big pool of unclaimed banking account assets that were sitting around to create pilot programs for what's known as social impact bonds. So the first social impact bond happened in England, and it was Peterborough Prison. And this idea is that you have a cost offset of reincarceration that will justify financing social welfare services. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but he is a very key figure. He has, there is a social finance, the original is in the UK. There's one in the United States. There is one in Israel. There may be others that I don't know of, but at least those three. And his wife is Sharon Harrell, I think, and her father was Yoshi Harrell of the Exodus, who was the pilot of the Exodus. So like he's involved in very connected networks, shall we say.
Just to add, it's quite funny because Sir Ronald Cohen, I mean, this is, I bring stuff from my own knowledge and research from other researchers, because Sir Ronald Cohen was born in Egypt, moved to the UK, and actually the world still today is run by the pharaohs from Egypt, who are based in UK and Switzerland. So it's quite, I mean, I would say coincidence, but obviously it's not a coincidence because it's planned to be like this. He was raised up to be what he is today and to serve in this position that he's serving now and to advance these plans. So there's no coincidences here. I mean, yeah, that's it. Just go on.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I said, the history is fascinating, the deeper that you go. So this is just a map just to give people of grounding. So again, the red dot is sort of the feature is Sir Ronald Cohen. His background is Oxford, Harvard Business School, so elite company. He's the founding director of the British Venture Capital Association. He was at, the Vatican. He's keynoted at all of these impact investing conferences. There was actually a Jewish impact investing summit at Fordham University in New York in 2017. He gave the welcoming remarks for that. So it's all, it's very fluid across borders for the rich. These are the social finance in the UK, but then the Israel and in the US. Let's see. He had something called Apex Partners, and this is really important. I need to look into this a bit more, but the way he talks, it sounds as though Apex Partners, his venture capital firm, was actually very much integral in providing financial support for the development of tech in Israel. So he was an integral character in actually creating Startup Nation, right? So you have Startup Nation. That goes on for a while. Then the next phase is the Impact Nation. So now he's taking it to Impact Nation. This is the big society capital, which was providing the seed money to start these financial products, because really it is it's financed as an industrial process. It's not unlike engineering a new manufactured product, right? That these financial deals are products that are designed so that you create a test case, right? You don't go into full production right away. You do pilots and you refine them. And so big society capital, with money flowing in from HSBC and Barclays and Lloyds and the Royal Bank of Scotland and the big lottery fund, are all flowing into here in this big slush to create these programs. Now, it's important to understand that all of these impact markets are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are not the green and wonderful things that everyone thinks they are. Essentially, this is the rule of the game to manage the poor within this military state and to manage nature. Because this technological domination is not just happening to humanity. It's important for us to understand our relation to all other beings in the world. They want to put smart dust on everything. They want to put a sensor on every tree. So when we're standing up for humans and the sacred aspects of life, it's not just people, it's actually all beings. So they're going to manage nature and they're going to manage humans to their purposes. And the rules of this are through the Impact Management Project. They're aligned to the goals. This is 2,000 of the world's largest asset holders. Okay, so, we're all somewhat implicated. Like if we have a pension fund or if we have, all of these big pools of money are going to be flowing through the UN Sustainable Development Goals as ESG investment, as environment, social and governance projects. They're going to tell us that they're doing good in the world. We're doing well by doing good. We're repairing the world with all of this technology. Nesta is connected in the UK. They provide a lot of technical expertise there in developing social impact bonds. And it's also important to know it's running through development aid, quote unquote, humanitarian aid, because displaced people are a central test bed for these technologies. Retinal scan payments, smart housing, educational technology are all being imposed on displaced people because they don't have people to stand up for them, and it's being framed as goodwill. So the IRC, it's very important to understand the development impact bond side of things. And this came under David Cameron, who he, in the UK at that time was creating this government outcomes lab, again, impact, creating digital culture and media to promote this. He was closely connected with McKinsey and this idea of deliverology, and Michael Barber, who is from Pearson and ed tech and educational data, was an advisor to him. So again, the education space, the Pearson affordable learning, that's cheap tablet-based learning to data mine and behaviorally profile children. And then Toby Eccles was working with Cohen, and he actually was the director of research for something which is just very bold. They just lay it out there: Absolute Return for Kids, ARC. And so they're doing school privatization in the UK under this academies model, and also social work in schools, sort of cut rate social work. But he runs a hedge fund. I mean, ARC is actually a hedge fund. He's connected to the hedge funders. And so, this pretense of social benevolence is not accurate. They're actually creating a market. It's a mining, it's an extraction program. And part of what they're doing with these impact, it's all fake. Like they're not improving people's lives. They're just improving the data. And they do that through nudging, and behavioral analytics and behavioral economics is a central element of all of this. So, the chief executive officer of Big Society Capital here, I mean, this gives you a good picture. This is Nick O'Donohoe. Okay, so Nick O'Donohoe was an advisor to the Gates Foundation, but he also was the global head of research for JP Morgan Chase, and he was the past executive director of Goldman Sachs. Right? So Goldman Sachs is involved in all of these impact bonds. They're providing the seed money in partnership often with Michael Bloomberg for impact bonds in recidivism, in early childhood, in digital pre-K. And then JP Morgan Chase is working in low-income housing, digital identity, digital health, and engineered labor force development. So, I mean, it's very clear once you know the deal. I mean, to me, if you look at this and you see the connections. And again, here's Sharon, his wife. She's a filmmaker. She does film. So that's an impact market too, is the propaganda to sell all of this. And then, her father is Yoshi Harel, who has passed, but, he was an advisor to David Ben-Gurion, and he was the captain of Exodus. So, it's interesting to me. I did not know this, but this ship evidently came out of Baltimore, which I need to know more about this, but Baltimore is the center of much of this in the United States. It's strange because you would think Boston, San Francisco, New York, but Baltimore is the Center for Catholic Relief Services and the Annie E. Casey Foundation and the Bloomberg School of Public Health and this Yet Analytics, and a lot of what surrounds Baltimore is the NSA and deep state, U.S. military intelligence. And so the fact that that ship came out of Baltimore originally is very interesting to me, just from a history angle.
Sure.
So, okay, so that's Ronald Cohen. And okay, so this is just another piece. Things I a lot of times what I spend, and this is not hidden, I looked at people's LinkedIn profiles. So one of the things that I found in someone's LinkedIn profile was that she helped set up this UK tech hub, which was operating out of the British Embassy in Tel Aviv since 2011, right? So we look at what's happening in the UK, and these are like, who is influencing whom here, right? So the NHSX and the artificial intelligence and the data analytics that's happening within the NHS is very much linked to what was probably being set up with biotech with the UK and Israel in this innovation, right? These innovation hubs. So who is being served by these innovation hubs if what we're doing is being set up to have biometric passports that control us for global hedge fund markets? It's kind of fascinating. So again, this is just to touch on, this is a quote from Cohen about Tikkun Olam, that essentially what we're going to do is we're going to use our business to advance impact. That they're blending those two in a way that I think was clearly never intended. Social philanthropy. Social philanthropy is actually a business, a business that minds poverty. It doesn't eliminate poverty.
And I just want to point, can you go back one slide, please? I just want to point out that everything is flipped. I mean, their language, the words they're using, the terminology is all flipped. I mean, it's all upside down. Social philanthropy, when you hear it, you think, oh, that's really good. But no, that's a business and it's against us. Now, the phrase Tikkun Olam, okay, in Hebrew, it means fixing the world. But actually what they are doing is breaking it down even more. So, and they, divide and conquer all of us. They taking control, or they're trying to get control over all creation. So it's not Tikkun Olam. He's taking over the planet. He's taking over the world. He's taking over the Olam. And I just want for people to realize that everything they are saying is exactly the opposite. I mean, its meaning is exactly the opposite. When they say we're going to make social advancement, prepare for something really bad, So I just want to point this out because most people do not get this terminology and how they are playing with us. And this is part of their, I would say, witchcraft. They're part of the hypnosis on us because we here and we got so accustomed to believing the government, believing the media, believing what they are telling us. And now everything, well, not just now, but everything is just flipped, is backwards, and people need to understand and stop believing these words and these lies.
I agree. I mean, when I first started, everyone kept saying, can you have a glossary? Because you need, you say a word and they, you think you have a shared understanding of what that word means, and they have a very different understanding than what you believe it to be. And so things move forward. And I often early on, I was like, I feel like I need a degree in semiotics, but I do think it actually is almost like casting a spell. And they do say, these people are very sophisticated. The Center for the Future of War, which is out of Arizona State University and funded by Eric Schmidt and with Alphabet, Google money, they have, I think now it's 4 focus areas, including drones and autonomous weapons, but one of them is a weaponized narrative. And so they know very well how to use language and visuals to advance their interests.
And I know, I remember you've said in one of your presentations how they make the rules of the game, even if it doesn't make sense. These are the rules, and as long as you play along these rules, the game is on.
Yeah.
And we don't have to understand the rules as long as they understand the rules and they play along these rules, and that's it. I mean, it's like it's a totally different world or different perception they have in comparison to what we have or what we know. And it's fascinating just to see the difference and to realize that we've been tricked, we've been hypnotized, we're being fooled, by them. Yes, go on, please.
So this is what I think we were mentioning earlier about the 8200 impact, right?
Yes.
So there is a channel of talent and expertise of people who, are trained within, the signals intelligence community, who then are, spun out, and then they create tech incubators. And there is a lot of, till I started looking into this, I really didn't have a good sense. I mean, I knew that Israel was sort of like the largest center of, tech development outside of, Silicon Valley, or I don't know, it might even be rivaling at this point, but I just didn't understand the full extent and how the mechanics of that work.
Neither do I.
It's a very big growth area. And, but again, it has to keep growing. It's not enough to make technology, then you have to come up with uses for the technology. And so now the uses of technology are to manage the industrially engineered society for the impact markets. So the alumni of the 8200 unit, which does the cybersecurity, and it's a very elite unit of signals intelligence, their alumni have actually created an entity called 8200 Impact. And so it is essentially an accelerator, a startup, an incubator program to use these technologies to solve social problems. And, to harvest, and clearly the 8200, alumni is a very extensive network. I'm sure is a global, globally dispersed network. And so this idea of linking the signals intelligence and the cybersecurity with social services, especially as we know, increasingly, and this is more coming through entities like IBM, but they're using like predictive profiling, where as we digitize all of these records, they start running them through AI systems, artificial intelligence systems, to make predictions that may or may not be accurate. And I would say, there is an understanding within, I think, more social justice communities that a lot of the training data is actually highly racialized. If you build the training data on information of past injustice and you further concentrate it and refine it, that those injustices will just continue to surface and become amplified. And so in some ways, the data is not neutral. The data can magnify past harms in ways that are potentially unintended, especially when you're using like artificial intelligence to do screening for child protective services. So here, let me just open. I found out about the 8200 social impact unit by reading this bio from Kira Radinsky. Let me see. I need to get it a little bit bigger. Okay, so she was the chief technology officer for the company Diagnostic Robotics, and they were the company. This is how I initially found it, that they were partnering with Rhode Island to do a self-checker, like a symptoms triage app, in partnership with Rhode Island. So I'm like, and Whitney Webb, I think, has done a piece about diagnostic robotics. But I was looking into her LinkedIn, and again, these people are very clear about what their background is and what their intentions are. And it appears that she is someone who is like incredibly talented and gifted in, math and computation. And so she's out of Technion. And then she has her her bachelor's, her PhD in computer science, and she's a visiting professor there. So she has, very close connections. And she doesn't herself have connections to Cornell Tech, but this is just touching again on all that we know about what's going on with Technion and Cornell Tech and these small data labs and telemedicine. She was an advisory board member to HSBC Holdings. Now, they are an investor in the big society capital, which we saw on the other map with Sir Ronald Cohen. And there's been an image that's been circulating around the internet, I think, for a while around, it's like a poster that was in a subway station with a thumbprint with like a QR code on it. And it says like your DNA is your life or your something, and it's an ad for this HSBC. So this idea that your DNA is sort of your currency moving forward. So she's an advisory board member there. She's on the board of the Israeli Securities Authority. She's on the board of the healthcare services that's involved in both DNA profiling and the electronic health records, because again, this is a eugenics project. This DNA profiling, this idea of bioengineering humans to some ostensible fourth industrial revolution, optimized cyborg world is a big element of all of this. She co-founded a company called Sales Predict that was about market predictions about, I think, consumer products. She was a researcher from Microsoft, and she was the former chief data scientist for eBay. Okay, so this is all about predictive analytics and markets, and then including health markets in health. Now, when I mentioned before about digital identity in India, it isn't just about Bill Gates and ID 2020, because I think in some ways Gates provides a front cover to a lot of people that are also lesser known, but also very important. Yes. He shields them. And so Pierre Omidyar is one of these. He was the founder of eBay, and he has spun off something called Omidyar Network that is doing a lot around ed tech and online education and inclusion and various sorts of digital social solutions, digital social, specifically in Africa and India. And as part of this, he and Gates are part of this Better Than Cash Alliance, and they're advancing digital identity systems that are linked to digital cash, which of course, as we know, like with the central banking systems, they want everybody on digital cash so that it can be conditional. His wife, Pam, is also part of a lab that does healthcare behavioral compliance and has digital nudge apps. And they're using that, it's something called Goal Mama, and they were using that on home visit programs with Nurse Family Partnership in South Carolina tied to Pay for Success. So this person's trajectory, she served, let me see. So she was a software engineer for IDF. She was in the 8200 unit, and then she was doing work through 8200 Impact. And so that's, you know, I know of that because Shira Lev Ami, who is, I think she's with the science division, but she was the CEO of Electronic Healthcare Records. And she was talking about all of this within the webinar, this idea of the 8200 Impact unit. So essentially, this is what we're talking about. Now, I'm sure like Ms. Rudinsky is a lovely person wanting to use her talents for good in the world, but I think we have to really understand what does it mean if we start attaching DNA profiling and global investment markets and proper behavior management and, you know, essentially a digital world that is run on signals intelligence that is fundamentally militarized. You know, I think I have a lot of concerns. I know I'm talking a lot. You want me to keep going? Is that good? I have a lot more to go.
Yes, please go on.
All right. So this is just a slide about Klaus Schwab. You know, we're looking at the Great Reset. This is the trigger event to push this fourth industrial revolution into action. And I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, this does not look like the world that I want to live in, right? Like bathed in EMF radiation and everything, sensing everything else and being in this giant panopticon. But this is what the COVID Great Reset is trying to trigger into place. And the decisions that we make today are affecting not just our own futures, but I would say fundamentally, if we start going down the path of bioengineering, the futures of the unborn, right? Like all futures to come and all the future of, you know, humanity and life on the planet. And so about a year ago, I came across this document called Roberto Viola. He's tied in with the European Commission, the Director General of the Connectivity, and he's imagining the Internet of Humans, you know, and this is really before, seriously, the pandemic I did not know much about synthetic biology and bioengineering and nanotech before this started. I was really looking at other kinds of data systems, but to me, it was shocking to see that someone would talk about aspiring to have an internet of humans. So then COVID hits, and it's not just the internet of humans, it's the internet of bodies, right? And the challenges of governing, our bodies, and this idea that we would have an unprecedented number of sensors attached to, implanted in, or ingested in our bodies to analyze and even modify our bodies and behaviors. Like, that's pretty intense. And I don't hear nearly enough people talking about this, either in the media or in general. I mean, fortunately, I do have sort of a lovely community online, but we need to have way more discussions of the ethical implications of having ingestible behavior modification programs tying us to the internet of bodies and these resonant 5G and soon to be 6G networks, and what the implications are. Like, to me, that feels like turning our body into a prison.
Of course.
And so I'm just going to sort of go through this a little bit faster, but this idea, we have wealth inequality. This is from my little video about social impact bonds. We have tremendous concentration of wealth at the top in a few hands. We have many people below who are impoverished, and capitalism has to keep moving, right? If you lose the liquidity, everything falls apart. The Ponzi scheme falls apart. And that's why even after the global housing crash a decade ago, they said, go out and spend money. Everybody has to still spend money, because if we stop spending money, the whole thing would fall apart. So the premise is capitalism has to expand, it has to flow. There's like a plumbing problem, because as we pointed out, it's all concentrated at the top. So how do we make the flow when the people at the bottom have no money or in our incredible debt? They can't keep the consumer society going. This is from a crazy report from the B Lab from 2009. And this is their report. Like, they were framing this as a good thing. It's kind of shocking, but they're talking about the evolution of the capitalist businessman. And it's kind of crazy. This is a report people should look at. The benefit corporations are this new sort of hybrid public benefit company that's essentially going to be tasked with carrying out the solutions public-private partnerships. And they've actually started talking about it as the fourth sector. So the third sector was the nonprofit, sort of nonprofit industrial complex. But now they're creating this hybrid nonprofit corporate structure that will carry out these the stakeholder capitalist program. So you can see they're talking about the colonial capitalist, the industrial capitalist, the shareholder capitalist, and the stakeholder capitalist. And they're saying that the stakeholder capitalist is more evolved because ostensibly their investments are making the world better for everybody. But I would dispute that. The B Lab is actually, again, this is where I'm at. It's based in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. They are setting the rules of the game. They were setting the impact metrics for the Global Impact Investment Network that was created when Judith Rodin was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, and she had formerly been the president of the University of Pennsylvania. So she left Penn, again, with many ties between Penn and Wharton and Israel business interests. She led the Rockefeller Foundation. They created the structure through the Rockefeller Foundation to formalize the rules of this new game, and they need the metrics. If there are not consistent metrics, no hedge funds are going to play the game. There has to be an agreement on the rules. So B Lab was there to set the metrics, and the Rockefeller Foundation funded them. This is from a crazy document called Global Education Futures. This was one of my rabbit holes early on. I have a friend who's a teacher, and she said, only click through to this if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But these folks are connected to this transhumanist program, Pavel Leksha out of Skolkovo in Russia. And he and a group of sort of global thought leaders were talking about remaking education for 2035. And they had this foresight document that essentially, this is a map. It's much larger, but they had this map to sort of predict how they felt things would evolve with these new markets. And they specifically talked about new models of human capital investment and promising youth human futures, that it would be adopted by pension funds and private investors. So none of this is hidden. Their intentions are very clear, that they are creating they are remaking human beings to be part of a futures market for pension funds. I want to emphasize, in addition to the last crash destabilizing and throwing people into all sorts of financial insecurity and debt. Another key piece of what happened to set up these markets was austerity. Because if our governments that ostensibly are accountable to the people had the resources to pay for the services, if we were all collectively putting money in and those in need were being taken care of, we would not need the public-private partnerships. If we had funded government services, we would not have, we wouldn't have impact investors, because the people that we would elect and the municipal officials who are supposed to serve us would do those jobs. Realistically, what's happened in this lead up is that we've had tremendous austerity. The governments essentially have been gutted. You know, like I think Amazon hasn't paid taxes in the United States for years. So those with the most wealth have these creative ways of sheltering their assets so that they don't pay into taxes. And they have created this huge austerity, these huge gaps. And it is in these, the austerity that opens the door to the impact markets, because then the governments can say, well, we really don't have the money to do the things we want to do, but maybe if we can create it as an investment, then we can proceed. So this is...
Now, Alison, by the way, just to add here that in the last, I would say 10 years, but probably it's more, the big corporations, they have promoting an agreement between governments and large corporations in order for corporations to take over some parts, at least. I mean, now we know it's not just some parts, but more of the resources of a country. This is one thing. Second thing is, in case the country would like to take a step back in an agreement with the corporations, it cannot. I mean, it can, but then the corporation can sue the government or the state for losses and for future benefits or for future profits, so that they will lose if the state or the government or the whoever the government is will draw back from the agreement. So basically, now I see your presentation, and actually, this is the TISA, T-I-S-A.
Yes.
And I see your presentation. Sorry for that. I see your presentation, and I think, hang on, this is connected. I mean, again, they have put the groundwork for all these big changes, major changes they are actually doing now under the COVID, you know, the COVID-19 story, you know, whatever it is. So it's quite fascinating to see how it all comes together now.
Well, they have a very long, I mean, I think people don't want to believe that it's planned out. Like, I mean, people keep saying, Alison, it's not, people don't plan these things out. I mean, if you are working in a corporation, and maybe not so much startups, but these legacy companies, right? If you're a part of IBM, or you know that these companies have 20, 30, 50-year plans and backup plans, right? But they have a vision of what they want to see, and that's what they lobby for, and that's what they create. So at this point, I feel like, you know, Google is our government in the United States. Goldman Sachs is our government. You know, JP Morgan Chase is our government. We no longer have control of our government, because the policies that are going to rule our lives through these impact markets are being decided, you know, all over in Davos. And that's what, you know, I had that engagement with Naomi Klein, you know, who voted in Davos, right? Who asked for this reset? Can we nobody voted in Bill Gates. Nobody voted in Jeff Bezos. Nobody voted in Mark Zuckerberg. Nobody voted in Klaus Schwab. They are beyond electoral politics. And in this moment, I think a lot of people are getting caught up in, is what's happening, the new world order? Is it socialism? Is it communism? Is it fascism? And I'm like, you know, it's this hybrid, right? It is a hybrid totalitarian control system, but it's certainly not the government taking over Google, right? It's certainly not, people need to understand the reality is that it is these transnational global corporate interests, much of which are based in finance and technology, that have embedded themselves into the government. Particularly and most at risk are communities that have social safety nets existing, because the United States does not have a great social safety net. It's been pretty gutted. But a lot of what's happening is happening in the United Kingdom because they have socialized healthcare. It's happening in the Nordic countries because they have these social safety nets, because it's being woven into the pre-existing architecture, these corporate programs. So anyway, this is just this is Judith Rodin. This is my connection sitting here in Philadelphia to Israel, right? Like these policies are very much fluid across these oceans. In the cloud world, they're almost immediate of these changes. And so I'm here as the ambassador of Philadelphia, of the city ostensibly of brotherly love, to give you a red flag warning that these programs are not in the interest of any of humanity. And we're also the headquarters of Comcast. Okay, so this is being run. It's run. The global digital prison is run by satellite, by the Operation Paperclip Nazis, but it's also being run through the telecommunications entities, and that's the 5G and 6G networks. And that's nobody wants to think that your jail is being run by your cable company, your internet provider, but that is in effect what has happened. And David Cohen, who is a prominent executive with Comcast, is on the board of trustees with Judith Rodin, and their crucible of working together early on in her presidency was around saving the healthcare system, saving the University of Pennsylvania's healthcare system. So we must understand that digital health, electronic healthcare records, using supposedly preventative healthcare to manage us and make us comply within this biosecurity state apparatus has been a long time coming.
Couple of questions, quick ones. Do you know anything about the states being a company or a corporation and not really a state?
There are folks that have a much better understanding of all of that than I do. I don't want to speak to it because I think in some ways the sovereignty movement and the setup of republics and the central banking systems is a whole other knowledge base that I know a little bit of, but not extensively. I don't want to speak inordinately to that. I mean, I'll have another angle on states and things later, if that makes sense.
Go on.
But just to mention again, the benefit corporations are central to this. The fourth sector, the B Lab that was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, again, they tried to get it passed in California, which is very interesting because here in California, Governor Newsom is one of the most hardcore lockdown advocates. And it's because California has always been very much embedded in both the tech and the social impact system because they have a very large population to manage. And there's also a lot of military and entertainment and gaming, video gaming R&D that happens in California. So anyway, okay. So the other connection here, I mentioned earlier that there was a Jewish Impact Investing Summit in here in the U.S., but it was very much referencing investments in Israel as well, because we know that there's a lot of fundraising that is cross-border, between the U.S. and between the state of Israel. And they were talking about reflecting on the impact investing conference that the Vatican Bank had held with Notre Dame's business school. Ronald Koeman was a part of that. He gave the opening remarks at this summit. It was based out of Fordham. And I didn't realize that at the time, and I can't remember. I think he may have passed, but the president of Fordham at the time was actually Jewish, which is interesting to me, from like a Jesuit university. So it's like an interesting overlap of them sort of bringing together both the Tikkun Olam, social finance, Israel element, and the Vatican Bank. Now the Pope has just signed on for inclusive capitalism and working, with AI to solve poverty. There's this blending of that in this investing summit. One of the speakers at this summit was Jonathan Greenblatt, who is, and I have to double check. As of 2015, he was the national director of the Anti-Defamation League here in Philadelphia, or not in Philadelphia, but in the US. He was the director. He is a Wharton alum, but he was also he helped set up Pay for Success Finance under the Obama administration in this Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation. So there are individuals who are in these policy spaces, who are in ostensible progressive policy spaces, who are setting this up, who are very much integral with sort of philanthropy and social care systems that are tied to Jewish social services, as well as, Israel, the state of Israel. I think that there is overlap in how those investments are made. So that's.
But just to say, Alison, for later, not for now maybe, but there's a question here: what are the solutions, if any, exist? So, I mean, you still have to run through the slides, but just a question for later. See if we can speak about solutions. I know it's not an easy topic because the problem is so complicated, but maybe the solution can be something really simple. Let's talk about it later, just to remind ourselves.
Okay.
Think about it. All right.
Let's see. I was so anyway, just so you believe, like if people aren't sure, like this is them. This is from 2012, where they're actually talking about using social impact bonds for early childhood and workforce development to be turned into assets that can be bought by investors and traded and turned into these asset-backed securities. So this is like the smoking gun, and people are like, "Oh, Alison, this isn't really happening. Like, I don't believe you about turning toddlers into impact securities." Like they said in 2012 that this was the plan, and a bunch of them they gathered for a summit in New York City in the fall of 2018. Ready Nation was the host of this event. They rang the NASDAQ bell, and they sort of said that we are ushering in this age of investing in pre-K and workforce development. So these folks in this room knew exactly what was going on, and COVID is triggering it. Again, you can securitize people. This is the Pavel Lecture crowd. They're talking about fortunes that are made up of people in human capital. It's all running through the central banking in the United States. All of the Federal Reserve branches, I have some maps over the past 10 years have been focused on creating human capital bond finance around reskilling the workforce for the fourth industrial revolution. And then this entity, EDLI, this is what I was talking about in terms of securitizing the debt, the income sharing agreements related to that reskilling. This is a little graphic that I tried to create for my video.
Amazing. You are so talented, Alison. This is really one of the best pieces
artistic, but this is the best I got to work with. If there are any good artists out there, I would love to work with you. But I'm trying to explain, like, how this fiction, right? How do they justify this crazy game? Because it seems like a crazy game. And if we understand that it may not really be real, but the rules of it is that essentially what they say is that we have this big social problem in green, this green box. It's very expensive. And my gosh, we don't have any money because nobody's paying their taxes anymore. This problem could be that we're paying for people to be in prison, or we're paying for people to manage their diabetes or their asthma, or we're trying to treat them for addiction, or there are people who are underemployed or unemployed. Maybe they're depressed. They have mental health problems. We can't get them in the labor force. This is a very expensive problem. How do we make money off of this very expensive problem? Well, you say, well, we have a solution that will reduce this big problem. So instead of paying this amount, you're only paying this amount. And look at all this money we saved you. We saved you all of this money over here. Don't you think that we could actually, this is the money we saved. So you still have a little bit of a problem, but we fixed a lot of it for you. We fixed a lot of it with our solution. Now, it doesn't matter. Set aside that this solution is really only data on a dashboard, and it may not actually really be a solution, but on a dashboard, it looks pretty good. So we saved you this money. Don't you think that we could get paid back and then just have a slice of this? Like we could just have a slice of what we saved you, and that could be our money, right? And so this is what they need to make the game start. And the money, the big money, is not in this slice that they take out for their profit for the deal, because it's almost like Bitcoin and crypto. Nobody would mind it if they didn't get a little payment back. So this is to make the game happen. We set this up. We say, we've got all of these chronic social problems. We're going to save you some money. And all we want is just a little bit back. We just like our money back and just a little bit of difference. And that's the premise of the social impact bond. That is what Ronald Cohen is selling the world. So these are the social impact bonds that are currently being contemplated or in various stages of development through Social Finance Israel. And that's Ronald Cohen's program in Israel. So there is one about diabetes prevention, okay? And that must be understood within the context of the role of wearable tech, okay? So they're gonna want people to walk for the dole. They're gonna wanna put a Fitbit, on you, or they're gonna wanna make you check in with your QR code at the park to make sure you get your heart rate up, or they're gonna give you smart shoes that count your steps or some crazy thing like that. There's one for elder care and loneliness. That depends, though, on individual communication technology. So I think what this is going to look like is they're actually selling services where they put iPads in the housing of older people, and then they have people talk to them through the iPad to keep them company and check on them and surveil them in their homes. So instead of having human care, you'll have someone in the Philippines watching your, parent or grandparent on a tablet and like sending them emoticons. And then that will capture the data for the impact deals. Okay. And so that's targeting Tel Aviv. Then they have a youth math program, because all of the education is really about STEM and cyber and training people not to think and not to question and not to be artistic or creative. They want the math minds and they want the coding people. So they're going to train the Bedouin youth in math. Again, they target vulnerable communities for that, because that's where they can get the impact. And then they have another one, and in the US, this is very big, about college retention, especially among first-generation college attendees. So the Edmund Rothschild Foundation is doing a program around reducing the dropout rate, not for theater or anthropology, but for computer science. So they don't want kids dropping out of computer science, and so it's with the University of Haifa as the partner on that. So these
are just the Edmund Rothschild Foundation is actually running the program in Israel to make sure all the schools in Israel run on Wi-Fi, and everyone has tablets and computers that run on Wi-Fi. Obviously not wired, God forbid, but Wi-Fi, because that's the future. Never mind, it gives you cancer and some other minor issues. But that's the goal. Yes.
Well, and I will say too, and this sounds unbelievable unless you looked at the paper, these papers and these are papers that are not, just readily available on the internet. So imagine the stuff that's not readily available on the internet. But someone forwarded me a link to a paper of research that was being done at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech does a lot of military contracting, and it was called the Internet of Bio-Nano Things. Okay, so this idea of the Internet of Humans and the Internet of Bodies and having these sensors ingested into us and resonate potentially with 5G or 6G is that they're saying it's too inconvenient for us to talk, even if we want a Siri in our house, to talk to Siri or to say something to our smart TV or to talk into our phone. We just want to have nanotechnology that telepathically through our thoughts and our bodily functions, that will activate machines around us. Right? Yeah. I mean, this is but it's happening through a military construct. Right. And synthetic biology. And my concern is that, there may be a small subset of people who think that's the most wonderful thing in the world to do that. But the world that they are building essentially precludes anyone who doesn't want to do that from having that choice. And that is a huge problem.
Yeah.
So I will say these social impact bonds essentially are based on contracts. They want outcomes-based metrics. They sign the governments and the investors. It is part of the key piece is it is a public-private partnership. To me, I feel like it feels like really fascism rolled out by hedge funds under the guise of these public-private partnerships.
Absolutely. It's a good description. Yes, good description.
But, so this is this three parts: the government, the nonprofits, and the investors. And I want to say, and this is very important for the idea of Tikkun Olam and social welfare, is that many faith communities are the ones doing the social services, right? That includes Catholic social services. That includes Lutheran social services. That might include the mega churches, evangelical churches in the US. And it's going to include the Jewish faith social services. And so these nonprofits are not just, they are embedded within the faith community, and people have to understand that. And I think most people of true faith would not stand for what is coming.
And Alison, I guess I know you aware of the word and the meaning of communitarianism, and this is also, it comes from Amitai Etzioni,
right?
And he's another Zionist, and it's based, or it's not based. It's not true to say, but he's taken some parts of the I would say the Jewish tradition, like Tikkun Olam, like this Ronald Cohen dude. So also Amitai Etzioni is taking some characteristics of the Jewish tradition, and he put them into communitarianism. And again, it's a communism under the hedge funds, run by the hedge funds. So, but it's like in a pretense to make it, wow, it's so good because we are in such a deep mess that we're going to fix the world with this new system of, whether it's a social capitalism or communitarianism. It doesn't matter now the name, what we give it, but as long as you think we're going to fix something, when actually we're going to totally break it.
Well, and it's very hard too, because I think most people want to do right.
Yes.
I mean, in my heart, like, I feel like the vast majority of people, they care about their families, they care about their neighbors. They're not out to harm other people, and they want to be perceived of as good people, and they really want to do the right thing, but they don't necessarily know what the right thing is, right? Because there's not a good way of untangling all of this.
Yes.
And so, especially in this moment, under this, biosecurity apparatus that's coming, the people that you would think would be standing up to these oppressive systems have been told that to be a good person is to go along.
Yes.
Right? To be a good person is to go along, and the people who are not going along are the problem. And that's part of, I think, this weaponized narrative that is really hard to, and that's why I'm trying to come at this, because, I think there's quite a bit of the resistance movement, at least here, that's framed as individual freedoms and patriotism, and it has sort of a national tenor. And I'm grateful to them for standing up. My lens is that this is about slavery. This is based on a long history of oppression and domination. And this is about our government, like, having never upheld its social contract to many people. And now it's all of us, and it's global. So we need global solidarity. We need local community and accountability, but we need to stand together, and we need to protect not just our own children, but all of the children of the world for now and for the future. So, it's complicated because, and the other piece of this is, I do believe that the goal is actually to this blockchain ledger with smart contracts, Ethereum smart contracts, where things are activated in digital with sensor-based technology, is to actually even code faith, to code the dictates of different faith practices on blockchain, so that if you become part of the portfolio of a faith community and your housing or your food is dependent on that, then you will be digitally compelled to follow the dictates of whatever that faith practice is in that construct, if that is if you end up in that portfolio, right? And what if the portfolio you end up in isn't your faith? Right? I mean, what if the day shows up and they say, oh, well, here you go, like, you're part of, the LDS, portfolio, you're part of and that's not you, right? But I'm sorry, you won't be able to get in your housing unless you follow our rule of religious law. That it's not just going to be techno-fascism, but I believe, based on what I've seen, that it is going to have a theological component, and it could be theological techno-fascism. And so what I am trying to do is get the word out to all people of faith, people who actually believe in the sacredness of life and nature and the web of the cosmos and the energetic systems out there, to say, this is unacceptable, right? Like, this is unacceptable what's coming.
I agree.
So anyway, so this is just turning people into data for these contracts. It's just a little visual. This is my little thing of, like, all the different things, whether it's your voting, you're in prison, your housing, your school, your hospital, your pre-K, your employment. All of this stuff is feeding the data into these analytic systems. And, I know 5G is an interest of yours. I do believe that if not these early waves of injections, what is coming are biosensors, and that will resonate with the networked systems. And this is coming through, like, the graphene and the nanotech. So, this back and forth data, maybe it starts on your phone, right, in your common pass, but eventually it will just be integrated into your biological function. And again, the the areas are health. So electronic health records are very central. And I will say in the United States, we have been fighting to get access to affordable health care for a very long time. The Affordable Care Act under Obama came with electronic health records. They want interoperable data. They want everything to touch. They want to know your school, your health, your housing. They want it all flowing together. The architect of the electronic health records and the ACA, that was Zeke Emanuel, right? And Rahm Emanuel and Ari Emanuel, Rahm is in Chicago, so commodities futures trading. Zeke is in the entertainment. So that's like the brainwashing and propaganda predictive profiling. And then you have Zeke with the health management and the electronic health records. So this is really important. They want to break down all the silos of the data. And you can see here in Clever, this is a child logging into their ed tech account, and they've got this QR code, which to me a few years ago, I was like, well, that seems really clunky. And that was because kindergartners couldn't remember their passwords to log in. So they would put this in front of the camera. But if you imagine now we know what the QR codes are really about. And they want all of the data aggregated. This bottom image is from something called Casita, which is essentially a mass-produced, like tiny house situation that has 60 Internet of Things technologies in it. And so you can imagine if you are forced in some communitarian program to live in a smart box with a smart toilet and a smart refrigerator and a smart TV and a retinal scan doorbell, like what kind of psychological warfare you could wage on people to make their behavior compliant with your impact deal. And that's all of these digital nudges. I do want to spend a minute just talking because this is a use case that was developed by the state of Illinois that I think is very compelling. If people are wondering, what does this look like? This has not yet been put in place, but this is part of the state of Illinois set up a blockchain task force, and they developed a report that came out in January of 2018. And they're imagining all of the use cases of digital wallets and social benefits. So this isn't in place yet, but they're imagining this is how that they could use it. And I will say this is about food access, but it could be anything. It could be your choice of educational curriculum, your choice of healthcare provider, your choice of therapeutic treatment. It could be many different things. And there's always the choice that they want you to make that will be weighted. And whether or not you make that choice will be tracked in the panopticon. So this is the welfare applicant, someone getting social welfare, their digital identity. So this is all part of the e-government system I talked about. You get a benefit wallet, and I will talk to you a little bit later. There's something about the Israel digital rights engine. So you get a wallet of benefits. And when you go to the grocery store, you can choose the good purchase of the apple or the unhealthy purchase of the hamburger. And this is Michael Bloomberg has been all about this for very long time about, he was the ambassador to the World Health Organization as well as the climate change. So his hands are in all of this about the calorie counts, and he wants these nudges. So the thing about this is, the average person might look and say, well, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I think it would be great if people ate more apples, right? What's the big deal? Like, we're giving them money. We should want everyone to be healthy. But what this scenario does not take into account is that these, this welfare applicant here might have 3 gig jobs. They may not have a working kitchen. They may be living out of the backseat of their car. They may be living in an environment that is extremely unhealthy air quality, right? And bombarded with 5G radiation. There may be many reasons that this person is not going to have good health that does not have nothing to do with the choices that they make. Right. But this is the impact market. And when we talk about impact, all of this is calculated. All of this is managed and factored into these social impact bond programs. So again, we need to understand the use of retinal scans, which is very big. This was being piloted on refugee populations, especially the Syrian refugees. Sorry, my stomach is gurgling, that they are actually developing nudge bands that will scan your food tied to your DNA. And so genomics and bioinformatics are critical, but we have to understand it within this sort of early eugenics program that was running through the Fabian Society, even on the left, and through the London School of Economics that is sprouting all of this stuff. This was actually developed out of the Imperial College London, the ones that ran that terrible early report that scared everyone with these terrible projections that didn't happen. And now the NHS in the UK is connecting these nudge bands tied to your food to your to COVID testing. Right. And so now we're looking at these scenarios where, you know, the NHS is doing this with DNA nudge bands, but we know that the UK and Israel have, you know, their tech hub sharing center in Tel Aviv. Right. I think all of us know that these programs, unless people refuse, are not just going to stay in the NHS. They are going to expand.
No.
So I'll quickly go through. This is just talking about the securitization. These social impact bonds in and of themselves don't have a lot of money. The social impact bonds are like mortgages. Imagine them like mortgages, but then they all get bundled into products, these derivative projects, and as liquid assets, they can then be gambled on by the hedge funds. And what I want to point out is that within smart environments, if we imagine that this layer of embedded sensor networks and gamification can make it easier or harder for us to accomplish the goals they set for us, these hedge funds can actually, potentially even through AI, syncing it all, like rig the game, like totally rig the game, either for individuals or whole populations of how they can accomplish the impact, you know, programs that they're supposed to do in their social welfare. So this is the derivatives, and these are the people. Like, this is how insane this is. Like, you sort of feel like this can't be real. Surely this can't be real. In the United States, the equations for these impact markets were developed in the Harlem Children's Zone. It's incredibly racialized. These programs are colonial and they are racial. And this gentleman, his name is Paul Tudor Jones. He runs one of the largest hedge funds. He got his start in cotton futures trading, okay? Commodities futures trading, cotton. He funds the Robin Hood Foundation. The Robin Hood Foundation poured money into Harlem Children's Zone that provided social welfare wraparound services. That entity was run by Jeffrey Canada and Stanley Druckenmiller. And Stanley Druckenmiller was George Soros's, a manager of one of his funds. And together they shorted the British pound for like over $1 billion in one day. So these are the crazy people who are running the programs. This is Paul Tudor Jones here. Here he is with Bill Gates. His gala, which this is at one of his gala, I guess he's Robin Hood here, is like the most sought after go-to event for all of the New York hedge funds. You know, actually he's in Connecticut, but all of the New York hedge funds want to be at the Robin Hood Foundation gala because these are these powerful people who are setting the rules of this crazy game. This is David Siegel. You saw Siegel Family Endowment was one of the funders of Cornell Tech. He runs Two Sigma. He used to work for Tudor, Paul Tudor Jones, Tudor Investments. He runs a hedge fund that is data-driven, absorbs large amounts of data to predict prices of securities, that's bonds in people, and it's run on AI. Right? So game theory and gamification are incredibly important to understand as they interface with hedge fund bets and smart cities and people. And Kevin Werbach, this is out of, he's a professor at Wharton, and his specialty is gamification and blockchain because game theory is central to hedge funds functioning.
Wow.
So they want to know who's good, who's bad, who's fixable, what the risks are. I think I mentioned earlier, like what they want is someone who's going to get a big return, right? They want someone who's fixable on paper, at least, with the cheapest amount of investment. And if you are someone who's not very broken or who's very broken and not going to move very far, they're not going to want you in their portfolio. The interoperable data is central to all of this. It's running through this National Interoperability Collaborative. And the interoperable data will be tied to the digital identity that will live on your phone. And these are being piloted, again, on refugees and on the unhoused people. So Michael Bloomberg is putting unhoused people on blockchain for their healthcare records. But it goes way back because in Philadelphia, these federated views of the constituent are us citizens as federated data objects was advanced by IBM over 10 years ago.
Question. Yeah. I don't think you have this slide here, but I remember in a previous presentation, you showed, I think it was an African woman with an African child. I mean, she was pregnant. I mean, you spoke about how they taking a pregnant woman and they, if you can just explain it even without the slide, how they can make money or project future profits from a pregnant woman and from her still unborn child. I mean, what's going on there? If you can just elaborate on that. I don't think you have this slide here.
No, I didn't put that one in. I mean, there's a lot
no,
of
that's fine. But just if you could just
sure.
So
it's important to know, as I mentioned, these are tied to the Sustainable Development Goals, right? These are being sold. These products, these investment products, are being sold to us as good things. And health is UN Sustainable Development Goal number 3. A lot of these are running through quote unquote humanitarian aid. There are true health disparities, right? There is unequal access to healthcare. But once you create healthcare as an investment market, it has to be digital. So through these aid systems, the first babies were born, quote unquote, on blockchain in Tanzania in 2018. And so what happened was that the unborn child was given a digital identity. The mother was given a digital identity. And the healthcare provider, their prenatal care, was given a digital code. And that when the woman attended her prenatal care appointments, each time that was tracked as data on blockchain. And that as almost like tokens, they tokenize these things. So it's like a token that you say you were supposed to have 4 prenatal appointments before giving birth. And that was all tracked on blockchain. And then they would say you could incentivize that by allowing the mother to trade tokens for some physical item. I think in the case of this, they said, for example, an umbrella, right? Like you could trade in your tokens for your good behavior, your healthy behavior for your pregnancy for some material item. If you have created a social impact bond around maternal health and your impact metrics are X number of women attended, fulfilled their responsibility of going to all 4 health appointments and had, a birth outcome that didn't require a NICU unit or something, like they will put a price on that. They will sort of profile and say, there's a cost out there, whether it's children being in intensive care or maybe some sort of long time, other negative effect on a birth or maternal death. They will put a price on that and say, okay, well, to solve that, we're going to do prenatal care. So our impact market is essentially setting up these women to comply, which is to say, it's great that women have access to prenatal care. I'm all for that. I don't think that it should involve essentially putting your unborn child on a digital ledger so that investors can make money off of that, right? Like that isn't charity. That isn't charity. That is digital slavery. Even if the outcome is that maybe you have a healthier mother and a healthier child, under what circumstances? Those circumstances is that mother and that child are now navigating a digital panopticon that they never get out of. That unborn child cannot give consent to be put on blockchain. And I do want to say, so this is a very sneaky thing because, Shoshana Zuboff is someone who talks a lot about surveillance capitalism and, that we should, I think there's a narrative that we should own our data and that will solve the problem. Owning our data will not solve the problem of telemedicine, ed tech, and the surveillance. In fact, it will only turbocharge it because MIT has developed this software called Enigma, which will ostensibly preserve our privacy, but still allow impact to be evaluated against this data, right? And so maybe they won't know exactly our data, but if we agree to be digital commodities in this world, that means that we have said that we are going to have tablets watch our elderly parents and that we are going to have our children be watched by Chromebooks, and that we will have, our loved ones who are suffering addiction will be treated with text therapy and virtual reality. Like that is the world we're signing up for if we agree to just stop and say, oh, fine, I'd like some privacy here. Sign me up for my digital identity. They're not telling you the secret story that because Enigma allows for querying unencrypted software, that by saying that we're going to keep it private, the only people who will be kept safe from that are the richest people who live on their own private islands where they don't have to do any of this stuff and they don't have 5G. Does that answer your question? Yes.
It's quite funny because a few months ago, the president or the prime minister of Tanzania came out after he's done some COVID tests for papaya and for a goat or for something like that. And I just want to point it out because there's so much fake news around, and people were like, right, Tanzania is with us, the president of Tanzania is fighting the corona scam and that stuff. But actually, what I see now, according to your answer, is that Tanzania is a test bed for the system of blockchain, like Estonia in a way.
Yeah.
They run this test in Tanzania. So Tanzania is deeply involved in this. I mean, there's no way this sort of thing happens in Tanzania without the prime minister or the president knows about it. I mean, obviously, he made sure he's part of it and probably also make some money out of it. So we need to always see there's more than two parts to the story, and it's really, really complex. I mean, people need to know this is really complex, and it's almost beyond our way of understanding what life is, because this is not life. This is a it's a twisted invention of bankers and of slave owners and of royal families and who knows, pharaohs, who knows. But this is twisted reality, and these people are psychopaths, where we are empathic people, and it looks like it, they aren't. So yes,
and people are misled. I mean, I think, I don't know why I've come to see all of this, and I see it because it's in my city. I think I've been have circumstances and situations that have led me to see it. And it's funny, I've come to be more of a person of sort of spirit around all of this. I'm not part of a practicing organized religion, but my friend who is very Catholic, and he's a farmer, and I was trying to talk with him about some of the stuff the last couple years, even before COVID. And and he said, you're a Jeremiah. And I was like, and I didn't really even know what that was. I was not schooled enough to know what the Jeremiah was. But I do feel like I am supposed to tell people this, because I can synthesize this bigger picture. And so I don't want us to be, I think some people get upset with me for pointing things out to imply that everyone is a bad person. I'm saying this machine is a bad machine, and we are all in it, right? We are all in it. And so to get out of it, we actually have to look at it. And we have to look at our part of it, not in a point of being shamed into an action, but to be empowered to say, I didn't know, right? And some of these people, I do think that there are people who do know. For us here, all of the COVID, the reset is running with the Green New Deal. Yeah. We were trained up and we were sold with a very big campaign around these progressive elected officials, around Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to do this Green New Deal. But no one can tell me that no one in Ocasio-Cortez's office knew that Goldman Sachs has a whole green bond division, right? No one can tell me that, because if she doesn't know that Goldman Sachs has a whole green bond division and that they're planning on putting smart dust on everything in the world so Goldman Sachs can keep track of it for the Green New Deal, don't tell me that, right? Then she has no business running this Green New Deal effort if she doesn't know that. And that's what I'm saying. They sell it with rainbows. Look how cheerful that looks. I mean, who doesn't want to be against a rainbow? And COVID, at the beginning of lockdowns, everybody put the rainbow in your window, right? It's bewitchment. But this bewitchment of the rainbow, this number 4 is education, equality. Well, guess what this looks like? This looks like these babies in headsets. Tell me, look at those babies in headsets and tell me that any normal, rational person could think that that is not a terror. I have to. So, yeah. And it's coming out of my city. It's crazy. I don't know if you know Raz Ben. He's really wonderful. You should talk to him sometime. But he's a geomancy guy, but he's very, very thoughtful about energy systems and lines and history and art and these stories. And his assertion that Ben Franklin and Prometheus opened the gates of hell in Philadelphia. And I can't say that it didn't happen, right? Penn is now doing human CRISPR trials. A lot of this stuff is coming. Penn is from Franklin's University. So I'm here to tell you from Philadelphia, just guys, we got to stop this. So these are these impacts: prenatal, early childhood, food, housing, literacy, character training, workforce training, health, behavioral and mental health, addiction, reskilling, forever and ever. like, and I did this a couple years ago. This is all pre-COVID, but these are all impact markets, and these are all about managing these babies as data. This is just an infographic I set up. Actually, it was connected to community schools that here they're planning to use the schools as points of data extraction, especially now that they're moving, like if we ever get real school again, but like even if they end up as drop-in centers, like they're going to be health centers, and that education will become almost like a medical and a mental health, mental hygiene program, literally programming for using it as a site of extraction for all of these things, not only for the students themselves, but for their families, like using the school as a basis of extending social welfare services, but not necessarily with the intent of helping people out of poverty, but managing their poverty, and using the schools and really the threat of in school settings of pushing social services or pushing digital interventions or medical services that the parents don't agree to. That as we move more and more social workers into schools, which has been a big push that I think is very sneaky, to say we don't want police in schools, we want social workers in schools. Well, I don't want police in schools either, but I think the social workers in schools are essentially just a different kind of agent of the state. Sure. And that if you create opportunities that as agents of the state, they can pressure families into making decisions about their children's mental health or physical health or academics in a way that's coercive or at threat of having social services involved, it's very terrifying. So anyway, yeah, augmented cities, like, you know, again, this is I keep saying to friends, imagine if they if the CIA and the US defense interests remade the world for hedge funds and they put the nonprofits in charge and we all lived in their mixed reality video game. You know, and so like here we are. It's hard to imagine like a year ago that we would be here. But Niantic, which was behind Pokemon Go, it was funded by In-Q-Tel, which is the venture capital arm of the CIA. You know, that's what Pokemon Go was about setting up this video game world with robot dogs and, you know, drones and, you know, geofencing, not just, you know, in the world, but even just in a room, you could be geofenced from other people. And as much as this is connected to Israeli intelligence, like clearly the US military and the US, you know, intelligence community is part of this as well.
Yeah. You mentioned before the subject of skills, and there, as far as I understand, they would like to have us in only 3 different skill sets. One is coding. Second is to work with pharma and pharmaceuticals. And what's the third one?
Well, this was in New Jersey. This is these career impact bonds. And I think at least in the US, we're seeing that different regions are supposed to be skilled into different types of sectors. And that's coming from the Chamber of Commerce. So it's almost like the Hunger Games, like every different, you know, division was supposed to have their different focus area for industry. In New Jersey, and these are these career impact bonds that are rolling out under the governor there, who's former Goldman Sachs. It was big pharma, which I think is really about cyborg and synth bio. It was coding boot camps to code the digital jail, and then it was smart energy. Smart energy, and that was, and I won't say that's for everywhere, but at least this pilot in New Jersey, that was their focus. That you weren't going to get to choose any job you wanted to do. You were going to have the option to do just the jobs that they want to have done to build this world into reality. And, you know, I will say, you know, it's crazy to think that if you allow corporations to engineer their workforce, a just-in-time workforce, they're always going to engineer it not to pay the best wages and have the best. The logic of that machine is that you are going to create an engineered workforce that always gives you more people than you need, so you can pay them less and cream off the top talent. Right? There will always be disposable people in that model if we're doing it for corporations.
And if you can just talk for a moment about the twin reality. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, the fact they want to build like a twin reality, a digital reality, which will, in a way, at some point, will substitute the physical reality I mean, if I see children with these VR goggles, and let's say 20 years fast forward, people will live only under these goggles, like they show in some movies now, in science fiction movies. And I'm thinking, this is really bad. I mean, not to say that everything else is really good, but this is really, really bad.
Right. Well, and the thing is, though, I think there are some people who have been trained to, like, in the video gaming world, they spend a lot of time in virtual spaces, right? And it's hard even for me, is that as a real person, the people who are in my physical space in proximity to me, for the most part, are not aligned with my understanding of what's going on.
Sure, tell me
So I
about
get
it.
driven into digital spaces, even though I would really optimally like to be organizing with people here in my real physical world.
Yeah.
That isn't where we are right now. So I would say, so 6G, I did not even know about 6G. I have a friend who's wonderful, who has spent 30 years doing coding and video game design, and he knows all about artificial intelligence and blockchain. So he initially told me about 6G technology. So that's already being lobbied. That infrastructure, New York, NYU, Tandon School of Engineering has, there's many institutes that are already pursuing the 6G technology, a lot in Japan, actually. But in some way, like, I think they're actually already, the military is running simulations, and they're gathering data for digital twinning and healthcare simulations. These digital twins, if you imagine, so this is another weird thing about Philadelphia, is that we're actually home of Friedrich Taylor, and Taylorism, this idea of creating assembly lines and doing engineering people so that they, like, maximize production. So Taylorism actually came out of Philadelphia. So they've created digital twins of machines and engines and all sorts of things to do like quick iterations, right? They'll digital twin things, like make an engine and then, run it as a simulation and see where the problems are, and then revise it and do that in a digital space, which makes, is interesting to think about. But in reality, they want to do that to us.
Yes.
And I believe that in the logic of capitalism, in order to continue to expand and extract profit, they actually need to create these virtual worlds. And within the virtual worlds, behavior and consumption of digital items will be the new digital currency. And maybe in some ways, that's why we need to move to a digital currency system rather than physical money, rather than physical gold or physical cash. Because if they're going to push the growth of the capitalist class into a virtual gamified world, the currency, gold, can't go there, right? Cash can't go there.
Yes,
Only
yes.
digital currency can go there. So, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of a person that I connected with was telling me about, I don't know if you pronounce it. I don't do French. Dassault, this company right here. How would you say that?
Where is it? Point mouse again.
Here, the big red dot. I don't know. So they are based in Rhode Island. Gina Raimondo is working on them in Rhode Island. It's a French company that was involved in defense and aviation. And interestingly enough, these Mirage jet fighters were part of the 6-Day War. So these individuals, interestingly, they have connections. The Bloch family were Jewish and then converted Catholic. So when they were the father was connected to Le Figaro, so very conservative. They have a lot of investments, but their background is in aviation. But the aviation, the human-machine connection, a lot of it is coming through avionics. And I know in the US, a lot of the early human-machine interfaces were coming through the Air Force, because it was the pilot's interface with the machine. So this early systems engineering was coming through the Air Force. So this is the French company, but their goal is to create digital twins for healthcare simulations. They want a digital twin for every person in Europe, I think. They're working on these simulations.
Can you say how the 6G is related to that? Even if it just briefly.
I mean, my understanding is that it is this next level of capacity that it is supposed to enable robot-to-robot communication. I don't understand the electrical engineering parts of it.
All right.
I know that I don't think that the digital twin full on is not going to be capable within 5G, the 6G, I think is what is needed. So, the other thing is they're partnered with Microsoft on 3D modeling, and Microsoft is actually building a planetary computer, and they are doing virtual Earth simulations. So just as they would like to simulate us, they want to simulate nature too.
Have you seen, Alison, have you seen The Matrix, the movie?
I did. It took me a couple years of doing this research, and my husband's like, you have to stop and watch this movie. Yes.
Yeah. So, right. So I'm talking just about the first one. Yeah. I mean, not the other two, but the first one. I
haven't seen the other ones.
All right. The first one is enough, really. There's this part when Neo is waking, after he's taking the red pill, he woke up in his incubator in the physical reality. He wakes up from the virtual reality. It's like from the virtual twin, right, world. He's waking up from this dream or nightmare into the physical reality. And then they pull the plug from here, and he's waking up in the incubator, and then someone, the little spaceship or whatever is coming to take him out from the incubator, and he opens his eyes for the first time, really. He opens his eyes for the first time in the physical reality, and he sees so many millions of people like him in small incubators being used as energy devices or as batteries for the machines. All right. Can you compare, if you can, between this scene of waking up from this virtual reality, from this twin virtual reality into the physical reality? Can you compare this scene from the movie to the plan to create a virtual reality or a twin reality or a twin, world or whatever you call it? Is there a point to compare, or it's just a movie and this is just reality and there's no connection between the two?
Well, I mean, I think the idea of the batteries, right? They need us to be the batteries to run the system. I mean, for a while, they will need our labor to build it. And that's what I'm here to try to tell people. Let's not code this, right? Let's not, it actually has to be physically built. It has a physical space. It lives on servers. It lives in cables.
Yes.
Let's not do this, right? Like, please, I don't think any of us want this to happen. So they need our labor, but then once we train the robots, there'll be a sort of a skeleton, crew of people who are physically out in the world. I think that's part of the biosecurity state, is to keep us contained, right? Eventually, we're contained in our homes. Maybe eventually we're contained in data pods. Maybe eventually the data pods become cots, in the camp. With our sensors, like our reality shrinks, and then they will offer us instead a virtual reality through these VR headsets that, you don't have freedom anymore, but you can imagine you're anywhere, right, in this virtual reality headset. Like you can, or through this Neuralink, right? Like the virtual reality headsets are very clunky. Eventually it's going to be some other interface, and it's a hijacking of our physical bodies to essentially, I think, mothballing our physical bodies to harness our mental, right? Because really what they're after, and many of these impact investments, because it's about measurable behavior change. Yes. Keyword behavior. Behavior is not just physical behavior, but it is mindset, is your mental process. And I think what they're ultimately after is, while they're controlling our bodies, they really want our minds and our spirits. And if you understand this, and this is a little more sophisticated, and I don't, I'm still trying to sort of figure it out, but I think all of this comes to electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Right? These transhumanists want to electrically engineer consciousness to put it in the cloud. Michael Bloomberg's undergraduate degree is electrical engineering. He made his fortunes in predictive analytics on signals intelligence. It's electricity. It is power. They want to control us in that way. And so I think the battery idea is not, it makes sense. I think there's a market element to it, and that's what I tend to lean on, is this idea of, they need a new capital market. But I do think that from a point of view of spirit, that this is a mining process, and that the mining is not simply in our behavior in the physical world, but ultimately through virtual reality, they will be mining mining us electrically, even in digital realms.
Yeah, right. Yes, I mean, yeah,
Does that?
you put it well. Yes.
And I'm learning all of this, right? Like, I don't claim expertise. I would love to meet people who are far more knowledgeable about energetic systems, about quantum, you know.
Alison, I invited you for this presentation, not because you're an expert, because of really, and I've told you this in the first conversation we had, you know, a month ago or so, I don't remember. The way you perceive and you connect the dots is highly valuable. Now, unfortunately, it's like most of my audience speaks Hebrew and it doesn't speak that well English, sorry, but he does. I have also audience around the world. I mean, less and less because I'm being censored, but people need to hear what you have to say. People need to hear not just what you have to say, but the way you see things and the way you connect the dots, because I think it's so valuable, because what you use is, you don't go into conspiracies, you don't go into this other side, which I'm really aware of for many years now. But what you bring is actually the economical side, the money. Where is the money? Where is the money in all this collapse? Who is making money from all this collapse? Okay, I know it's Amazon, I know it's Facebook, I know it's this and that and the other, but what's going on? And actually what you show now, and I would like to speak also about this slide, how broken people, which this is the COVID-19 actually is going to make, and is already started to make, a lot of broken people. Yeah. I mean, life are trashed, really, in a very cruel way, the way I see it. How this broken people, broken families, broken houses, broken life is going to make profit to these bastards. How, if you can just explain, even in this slide, how the process is happening, because most of us, we don't live in this perception. We don't see reality as it is, and the way what you bring forward is so valuable. So how broken people are being used as raw material to extract profit from. What's going on here?
Okay. Okay. Well, this one I had pulled up originally because of the digital twin part of it. But as far as, so the broken part, I will say mental health is a huge piece. It's an impact market because what the cost offset, they will say, will be like unemployment, right? Like people are depressed, so they can't go to work. There's an economic cost. So that's how they justify the offset for the solutions. But these solutions will have to be solutions that can capture data, and they will be things like text therapy, right? Or virtual reality therapy or online conferences. And I will point to something that I found really disturbing that, again, I would not have found if I hadn't been just going really laboriously through these LinkedIn profiles. Was that the woman here in the United States who was the founder of the crisis text line, right? So that you're texting if you're having self-harm thoughts, right? It's this text line. She actually used for machine learning, AI, machine learning, all of those exchanges to develop corporate software for call center customer service management.
Can you say it again? Sorry, I didn't understand.
So she created a company called Loris AI, LORIS.ai. Okay. This software platform that she created, a for-profit, used the training data from the suicide text, the text shared by, to create data sets that would help leverage that knowledge of how to have people better manage call center interactions.
Right.
Okay. And actually on the website, I don't know if it got removed, but when I first saw it, they were joking that the loris is a poisonous lemur.
What's a lemur?
It's like a, I don't know, it's not a sloth. It's like a tree animal with a tail.
All right.
Like the Boomafoo, there was some kids show about it. Like
All right.
it's like a animal. It's a poisonous mammal.
Yeah.
And that was their company. I mean, to me, that says that there are some very dark forces at work.
Sure.
That someone would take the suicide crisis text line data and not only leverage it for corporate profit, but then to name the company after a poisonous animal. And then brag about it on the website.
Sure.
To me, that shows that there is something really tremendously upsetting going on. Now, I will also say on the mental health, Bank of America has been very big into doing pay for success finance around post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans and virtual reality. So cognitive behavioral therapy, these therapeutics that can be done on digitally, right? Very basic therapeutics that may have in some limited use cases be appropriate, but not on a massive level, not to deal with the trauma that is being created. Now, the equation for that was actually developed by a guy in the UK. His name is Richard Layard, on labor economics, the Center for Labor Economics. And I think it's out of the London School of Economics is his, but he has a whole set of equations about well-being. And they will talk about measuring well-being in the world, that we need economies not just based on profit, but on well-being. But what they're not saying is that that well-being is essentially digitally surveilling your emotional states through devices. So I will also say in public school environments, there's an equation for social emotional learning for behavior that was developed through the Teachers College at Columbia University that essentially is saying like we can get, I think it was like an 11% return on investment on good behavior curriculum, right? So you're going to have kids coming back into schools who have spent, the better part of a year under tremendous stress, who really don't have good coping mechanisms. A lot of these are really young kids, and they're going to be coming back into school settings with a lot of needs, right? And their needs are not being set up to be met by real people with humane care, but as impact markets. This is all market shaping. So that's the emotional piece of this. ACEs scoring, trauma scoring, adverse childhood experiences, that is a factor in the pay for success market. So those who are most harmed, especially they're even factoring, I believe, in epigenetic trauma. So here in the US, people who are intergenerational trauma, the Black community, Indigenous communities, those are going to be targets for these impact markets if they are perceived to be fixable, right, and not disposable. So that has to be understood. The other piece that this map speaks to is reskilling. And again, we talked about EDLI and the securitization of these income sharing agreements. Now, I know a lot of folks, all of this is advancing. Everyone in government is in on it, right? And I know, like, even in the US, like, we are in a hyper-partisan moment. People are being set up against one another. And while there are, differences of opinion, all the folks in power are in on it. Here in Davos in January, they had a panel, Reskilling Revolution, Skills for a Billion People. So this is reskilling people to build this global prison planet. And Ivanka Trump was on that panel. And she's the co-chair of this Workforce Policy Advisory Board, which is essentially going to set up online credentials, pathways, and these blockchain education programs. So Trump is just as much in on this as anyone else. Also, but hugely, the neoliberal class, the technocrats, the Mark Benioff and Salesforce, who just set up business in Israel as well in the last few years. He's running the data dashboard social suite. He's going to be working on the digital identity and blockchain. And where this connects to the digital twinning is that if what you're trying to do is you're going to put people to make them jump through all sorts of hoops to demonstrate all sorts of skills for jobs they're never going to get because the robots are going to do that job. By the time they're trained for that job, they're going to have to train for the next job and the next job and the next job. But the impact markets will be built on stacking credentials. The game will be that you go through the hoops and get the credential, whether or not you ever actually get to apply your knowledge to a real job. That is this reskill, upskill element. That is what's tied in with the Markle Foundation and the Rework America and Skillful. And I'm sure that you guys have this too.
Hang on, what slide am I looking on? I'm looking at still at the broken people raw material slide.
Oh gosh. I thought I was, my gosh. Yeah. You know what? I thought I had clicked over to the, to dissolve. Oh gosh. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Marie.
I thought I was doing the regular screen slide, but I guess I'm just doing the slide capture.
All right, but I'm still. Can you?
Yeah, let me. You know what? Let me see. Oh gosh, now I'm echoing. Oh gosh, Shai, I'm so sorry. Here I've been babbling on for so long.
Do you want me to share my screen?
No, because this one I had jumped off my slide share into the screen capture. I thought the last time I did this, I was on a different screen capture. Okay.
So.
I don't think I can go back. So I'm just gonna have to keep going forward.
Can you just press? But I have the slides here. No worries.
I know, but this isn't a slide. I was opening a different thing on my screen on my desktop. That's what I was talking to.
I see.
So sorry. And I didn't. I thought I was just on my full screen capture, but I think I was only in the slide deck because it would only work that way. Okay, well maybe I should just keep going. But it's the virtual reality. So they're going to these little babies in the headsets down here for the reskilling. Okay, imagine that they have something called XAPI technology. The XAPI technology allows use of virtual reality and haptics to log that you have accomplished tasks into a digital locker. So imagine that you are a teen in a virtual reality headset or an elderly person or a 50-year-old trying to be reskilled. They'll put you in a game and have you play the game of earning a skill. And then the investors will be betting on that. Not that you ever actually get to use your skill, but just that you got the credential. And that's how the markets are going to go. So I'm so sorry. Okay, so, all right. If it's
Hi.
This is The Big Short.
Hey, Mr. Bennett.
This is about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's see what you got. You smell that? What is that? What? What's that smell? A cologne? No. Opportunity. No. Money. Okay. I smell money. Okay. Chris. Damn it. Sorry. This is your basic mortgage bond. All right? The originals were simple. They were just thousands of AAA mortgages bundled together, guaranteed by the U.S. government. The modern ones are different. They're private, and they're made up of layers of tranches. The highest level AAA is getting paid first. The lowest rated B is getting paid last, taking on defaults first. Now, obviously, if you're buying Bs, you can make more money, but they're a little risky. Sometimes they fail. Chris? Somewhere along the line, these Bs and double Bs went from a little risky to dog shit. Where's the trash? Behind you. I'm talking rock bottom FICO scores. No income verification. Adjustable rates, dog shit. The default rates are already up from 1% to 4%, fellas. And if they rise to 8%, and they will, a lot of these triple Bs are going to 0 too. And that, you're too close, is an opportunity.
Okay, you're saying that at 8% the bonds fail and we are already at 4%?
That's right.
If they go to 8, it's Armageddon.
Yeah, that's right.
How come nobody's talking about this?
You're completely sure of the math. Look at him. That's my quant.
You're what?
My quantitative. My math specialist. Look at him. You notice anything different about him? Look at his face.
That's very racist.
Look at his eyes. I'll give you a hint. His name's Yang. He won a national math competition in China. He doesn't even speak English. Yeah, I'm sure of the math. Actually, my name's Jiang, and I do speak English. Jared likes to say I don't because he thinks it makes me seem more authentic. And I got second in that national math competition.
So you're offering us a chance to short this pile of blocks? How?
With something called a credit default swap. It's like insurance on the bond, and if it goes bust, you can make 10 to 1, even 20 to 1 return, and it's already slowly going bust.
10 to 1, 20 to 1. No way.
And no one's paying attention. No one is paying attention because the banks are too busy getting paid obscene fees to sell these bonds.
But wait, you are the bank. When you work for the bank, I bet your margins are pretty nice and fat.
Let's not talk about my margins, by the way. Being nice and fat. That's a nice shirt. Do they make it for men?
Aren't you the bank?
I work for the bank. I don't think like a bank. Big bank, small bank, I like to make money. All right? Let me put it this way. I'm standing in front of a burning house, and I'm offering you fire insurance on it. A's, 0. B's, 0. Double B's, 0. Triple B's, 0. And then that happens.
What is that?
That's America's housing market.
All right. So I just wanted to share that because I think that's where we're at. Did that come through? Okay.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. Now, it may take a while before we get to the point of credit default swaps on toddlers, but that's why I have to talk to you guys today. So I think I'm getting close to the end. This is a slide that talks about just the impact management project, 2,000 of the world's largest asset holders, Omidyar Network, that's Pierre Omidyar that we were talking about earlier, but also BlackRock is in this mix too. And this idea of tokens, right? That you can set digital assets and rights and privileges as tokens, including this WellCoin. In Australia, they're already talking about tokenizing on blockchain disability payment benefits. So programming money, so using digital assets in e-wallets that would actually constrain your ability to use those assets in different ways. And in Australia, they're pitching this in the media already, walking for the dole, right? If you're going to get some benefit, then we're expecting some sort of healthy behavior. This, I will say, this is another short one. This is just a couple minutes, but if you understand the world as a augmented reality video game that is layered in with contractual agreements in which people who are in crisis modes or who are preyed upon by sort of these larger systems of data collection, when you fulfill your obligation on this pathway, and you'll hear a lot of language around pathways, that's when the nonprofits are getting paid and the investors get paid. So this is a short video that I think really captures the nature of these pathways and smart bonds. When the family goes under the banner, that's like a smart bond token payment. And so this is just short, but it's important to note that they are involved in this family because the man in the household was involved in the judicial system. And so knowing how many people, at least in our country, are involved in the judicial system, the daughter and the child, the wife and the child get sucked in, not because they did anything wrong, but merely by association that someone in their household was part of the judicial system. So let me just play this.
Meet Kathy. Kathy is a community care coordinator employed by a local nonprofit. Kathy's organization is part of the Better Health Together Pathfinder Community Hub, which makes her part of a regional network of community-based care coordinators committed to providing standardized, whole-person care to people at risk. The hub receives referrals for families and individuals needing support services and pairs them with community-based coordinators like Kathy. Kathy has been helping Joe navigate and access services since he was released from jail. Because Joe will be more likely to succeed if he knows his family is healthy and supported, Kathy will be working with his daughter Sarah and her mother Amy too. Kathy begins by going to their house to start a comprehensive risk assessment that will identify what services Amy and Sarah might benefit from. For each risk, Kathy assigns a pathway, a standard, evidence-based care coordination plan designed to remove barriers to good health. Each pathway is tied to specific outcomes, and Kathy will provide support, accountability, and encouragement to Sarah and Amy to see those outcomes are met and each pathway completed. Kathy learns Sarah has been missing school because of her severe asthma, which has sent her to the ER multiple times. She assigns a medical home pathway to find a regular primary care provider for Sarah and a medication management pathway to verify Sarah is taking her asthma medication as prescribed. Kathy assigns Amy an education pathway to present some information about her tobacco smoking, which might be affecting her daughter's asthma. They talk about available support to help her quit, and Kathy assigns a smoking cessation pathway. Kathy will make regular home visits to check in on Sarah and Amy's progress and can help schedule appointments and arrange transportation. For every pathway Kathy's clients complete, such as when Sarah attends her primary care appointment or when Amy quits smoking, Kathy or her organization will receive an incentive payment rewarding her for those outcomes. In addition to her pathways, Kathy will access the Hub's up-to-date resource portal to find community connections that will support her patient's health. Because Kathy tracks every step of this process in the Pathfinder Care Management System, all of Sarah and Amy's providers can access and share real-time data on their clients. This data helps Better Health Together manage quality, identify gaps in service, and increase the likelihood of success for our community. The Pathfinder Community Hub gets the whole region working together for better health.
All right. So, I mean, I think you can see there the pathway.
Meet Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
Kathy is a community care coordinator.
Okay. So you can see that there's not really an incentive to get anybody off a pathway. You want to put people on as many pathways as possible, not let's get them off. And it's all framed as healthy behavior. So, yeah, so that's the blockchain. That is digital payments. That is impact, right? That is how the criminal justice system, at least in the US, which is huge, that complex that was actually built off of how to manage excess labor through the last phase of globalization, will now essentially turn the world. We can defund the police and we can, bring people out of prison because we're turning the world into a prison, and we can eliminate guards because we're turning the social workers into the guards. And it's really important to understand that the people who are the social workers are also going to be watched, because they're going to manage leaderboards on this as well. Are you still there? Are we still? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, sure,
okay,
sure.
All right, cool. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. My computer is heating up. And now I've got a pointer, which is kind of crazy. I accidentally clicked on that. Okay, so Israel has social welfare, right? So you guys have stuff. And I wanted to pull this out because this is from the National Digital Israel Plan, and they talk about a rights engine, right? And focusing on senior citizens and making sure that they get all of their rights. And that's sort of like their public benefits. And this is a red flag for me, because Philadelphia has this poverty initiative that our city council picked up. And part of it was essentially framing that everyone should maximize their benefits. And again, I'm not against people having access to the services they need, but knowing that it's really about impact markets. I had a lot of questions, and there's something called the Benefits Data Trust that is backed by all of the impact investors, including Mark Zuckerberg, and Facebook. And they're trying to, again, do senior citizens with AI and maximize the benefits. So this is supposed to sound good. Like, here are your rights, right? Here are your rights, all of the things we're offering to you. But in reality, my concern is that this framing is setting up a conditional element, right? As an e-citizen, you have rights, you have things in your digital wallets, benefits that you're entitled to. But if you are not complying with the pathways, if you are not with the program, if you do not demonstrate that you are being impacted appropriately, that those rights can be conditional, right? And my concern is that if we start interfacing with smart worlds that are run on blockchain smart contracts, where do civil rights fit into that, right? If we are working in digital contractual Internet of Things contracts that are tied to global investors, are we accountable to our investors? Are we sovereign beings? And this is a really important conversation I think we should be having.
And hey, where is God in all this?
I know it's a lot. So these last few, I have a few more maps. This is the investors in social finance Israel. So I found it interesting. If you go to Crunchbase is a really useful website that talks about, there's a certain amount of information that's available without a subscription, but it will give you basic information about a company. And it talks about like the phases of investment in social finance Israel. So Vital Capital, which is like a biotech, many of the investors in Social Finance Israel are biotech companies. These two people, Ruth Arnon, who is a scientist with the Weizmann Institute of Science, she's a very renowned scientist, was a lead investor, as was her husband, who is connected to the aerospace industries. And again, I have a friend that I made on the internet, and he's always saying, like, the ones who control the skies, win. Right. And so if we understand that is both potentially geoengineering and satellite control, the aerospace industries are huge parts of this larger digital control system, cybernetic system. Israel Makov, he has made a ton of money in all sorts of pharmaceutical, neuroscience, different biotech companies. So there's definitely a biotech leaning, like, within the investors in this space. Checkpoint Software Technologies, which is cybersecurity, but people connected with 8200 unit and Talpiot, in that mix. And then the bank, one of the individuals who was part of the Rhode Island webinar was the head of strategy for Bank Hapoelim. But they also have a New York branch, so it's very important to understand that the finance pieces are both within the state of Israel, but also often overlap with U.S. finance interests, specifically like Boston. More Boston biotech in the finance is through New York. So
one second, Alison. I just want to tell the audience that while what I'm saying about Israel now is true for the whole world, basically. While everyone is, I would say, busy with the COVID-19, while everyone is busy with the day-to-day life, while everyone is busy with checkups and vaccines and what have you, all right, all this bullshit that the mainstream media is feeding us with and the government is feeding us with, while all this is happening as the show on the stage, behind the scenes, many Israeli companies, many Israeli institutions, foundations, scientists, high-tech people, investors, politicians, and many other people in occupations and businesses are actually busy, very busy, in creating this new digital government or new digital reality in order to be the vessel to have us all, while the COVID-19 is going on one side, when it will all be sort of finished, we can be pulled into this virtual digital government or reality, and it basically they will fit us into this digital reality. So it's kind of like a camouflage. What's going on now as the COVID-19 story is going on, this is like a camouflage for the true reality, which is being prepared for us by all these names and companies and businessmen, etc., etc. Am I right by saying that?
Yeah, I think it's a spectacle.
What does it mean?
Well, I think it's a spectacle to distract people and also to divide people.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I'm fighting over masks. We're fighting over we're fighting over things that I'm not saying that they're not significant, but in the end, we really need to be looking at this larger structure. Like, we need to be having serious conversations to say, are we agreeing to the fourth industrial revolution? Like, do we agree to be synthetic cyborg beings?
Yeah.
Right? Do we have a right? Do those of us who do not choose that path, how do we defend our right to not have the world overtaken by that? Right? What is our position in regards to nature, right, and the environment? What is our responsibility and our obligation to beings who cannot, certainly not give consent? And I've spoken about this in some of my other talks, but this was already advanced through tracking wildlife, right, under the cause of endangered species. Like, we've been tagging and tracking our fellow beings for a long time, right? And now it's our turn. So there's a lot of serious conversations we need to be having.
Sure.
And we're not having any of them because clearly the media is taken, like the media isn't also an impact market. It's called solutions journalism. I mean, it was developed by the New York Times and it's taken over pretty much every newsroom and academic program in the United States and other places.
Yeah, same in Israel, sure.
They're not going to tell us.
And this is, Alison, what you're presenting now, this is really the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, the fourth industrial revolution is just a name, but what you've been through in this presentation, the slides and the topics you picked, this is the fourth industrial revolution, and it's going against human development. I mean,
well, they want to develop us into something that's digital.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, so I'm realizing that I can't, that I'm not sharing. I'm really sorry that I didn't realize earlier that I wasn't sharing my screen, but I think I'm going to stop this part and then I'm going to see if I can, am I still in the program?
You are here, everything is good. I see you, everyone can see you and hear you.
All right, well, I'm trying to figure out how to, oh, here's the StreamYard. Okay, I am trying to figure out how to share the screen with this other, screen sharing works better on a good computer. Share screen. Let me. I'll do the Chrome tab. I'll just do the entire screen. Can I? It won't let me share the entire screen. That's really frustrating. Okay. Okay. So I made slides to show some of these maps. And I thought I was sharing them with you and I wasn't. So let me just walk back. This was the one I was talking about previously about digital twins, which now I see why you couldn't understand what I was talking about. Can you see this? It says Dassault here
Yes.
now. Okay, this is what I thought I was showing you before, but clearly I'm not
Yes.
on all of this. But this is the digital twinning. Okay, so this is the digital twinning with the healthcare, the planetary computer with Microsoft, the virtual reality gamification and training. You know, Ivanka and Mark Benioff up here with the blockchain credentials, the stackable badges. And then this is, you know, back to work. We're going to use COVID and get people back to work, but only in things that we want them to do. And, you know, through the Markle Foundation, which is very much about cybersecurity. And then this Dassault Systems, which is in Rhode Island, but as a French company, has this history in aviation. And specifically in like the Dassault Mirage jet fighter that is part of the Israeli, you know, military services. So there are these, this is how the digital twinning looks. And then let me look at another, let's see. Sorry, I'm stop this screen share. Let me just pull up another one. I wish I was a little bit better at doing all of this, but
it's all right. It's all right.
Sure.
It's only 3.5 hours that we are on.
I know it's so long. If people are still here, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? Let me show the board. Okay, so can you see this Social Finance Israel board?
Hang on, sorry. Yes.
Okay, so you know it's always useful to know. So who is on the board here? So of course, Sir Ronald Cohen. This is his baby.
By the way, these slides are on the presentation.
Can you see it on the screen now?
Yes. I'm asking.
It's in the presentation, yeah, but they're not big enough, and I can't zoom in on them when they're in the Google slides. So I had to.
Sure. I understand. That's great.
Yeah, and the thing is, these are all interactive. So I will share this, and if you want to share the link on your page, people can dig in, and I will say, you know, on this you can, you know, click through on any of these folks, and it opens up the database system.
Excellent.
So, you know, people can dig in and actually look and see what the other.
This is listen. You just to say you got a compliment here, which I totally join. Where is it? Sorry. That you are really professional and you've done a great, amazing research and really professional and thorough research, and that you are amazing.
Thank you. I mean, I do it with people. I mean, I feel like I'm a conduit, you know?
Sure.
There's something I'm supposed to get out in this world, and I have to do my best. So if this helps inform people, I really do feel like we're in this moment that really we're facing this singularity. Like, I didn't think I would see it in my life. Like, I really didn't think that this idea of even if it's not general intelligence, the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning really usurping many, like humanity. I thought more people would fight. So I'm hoping more people will join this struggle.
I hope so too. I've been trying for 12 years now to wake up people. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So let's see. So we have Mr. Feller, who's like involved in capital markets and medical stuff. Amir Levy was with the Ministry of Finance and renewable energy. So then again, that's going to be the green stuff. Yad Hanadiv, maybe you have a better sense of all of that, but I think that is a major player. They were
Yad Hanadiv is part of Rothschild.
Yeah. So that it's part of this larger historical context. Open University, Israel, they were the sponsor of that. Is based on the Open University of the UK. So I think that is going to be with the reskilling and the badges, even though it's old, it's been around for quite some time. But that this education piece with Yad Hanadiv is going to be important. Ariel Weiss, let's see. Georgetown is a center for a lot of this in Yale. And he's with Yad Hanadiv. Okay. So, and then, Galia Meor.
Galia Meor is a big bank in Israel, and there's a few other banks I've seen already.
Yeah.
Here.
And Teva Pharmaceuticals is very big. So that's
really big.
It's a combination of banking and pharmaceuticals. And then Martin Karp, I think maybe was originally from the US. He was with the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston. So there are a lot of connections between funding and social support and business development in the US in various areas. And Texas is actually a center for, I did not realize until I started digging in to what extent Texas is a huge center of this. Florida for the military and the simulations, but Texas very much, and Austin in particular on blockchain healthcare.
And of course, I see the World Zionist Organization and Israel Defense Force and Chemi Peres.
Yeah, so here we go. So these are all of the things. So he was the founding partner of Patango, which is the early social impact fund. And, the civic innovation, but I just spent some time really going through and looking at all of his involvements in all of these different kinds of apps.
Exactly. Remember what I said before about Peres, about Shimon Peres, what I said before, and see his son, how deeply he's involved with his dad's activities. See what I mean?
Yeah. So these are all these different kinds, both aerospace, decision systems, impact investing, but then lots of these are different kinds of apps and technologies related to Fourth Industrial Revolution and sort of Agenda 21 programs.
I'll be more than happy, Alison, to get links to these maps because it's important.
Yeah. So this was an impact summit. I think this was 2019. It's always good to see whose money is involved. And I know you had said about Switzerland. So look, here we go. We have Zurich Insurance.
Where are you? I don't.
Oh no! Thank you for the reminder. I have to click over. Let me kill this one. So wait a minute. Stop.
Switzerland is deeply involved in all this.
Yeah, Switzerland. I think very much. So wait a minute. So share screen. Let me get to a different screen. Chrome tab. Social Impact Summit. Okay, this one. Okay, can you see this now? Israel Impact Summit.
Yes.
Okay, so this is 2019, the Impact Summit. So who were the hosts and who was involved in this? So again, Switzerland here, we have Credit Suisse, we have Zurich, we have the Embassy of Switzerland in Israel, the country of Switzerland, and this holding company, which there's something I believe in this company that is connected to an overlap around printing and currency printing and inks. That also is morphing now into digital currency and banking. So we have all of the Switzerland stuff over here.
Quick question, Alison. Have you come across Liechtenstein?
I haven't come across Liechtenstein yet. But it's not to say it couldn't be hiding behind some of these.
Sure. I know. That's why I'm just asking. I know. Because Liechtenstein is involved, this. I don't mind to bet with you on that, but I don't want to be like them, like betting. So
I haven't seen it. It's not in these maps, but it's important to know, again, they're framing this Tech for Good as the company, because of course, tech is only for good. So, they're the hosts. This is some of the, the corporate interests. So Deloitte, within this new system of accounting and contracts and law, the big accounting firms and consultancies, the Deloitte, the Accenture, the KPMG, they're all key figures in this. But it's interesting, you have the stock exchange here, you have the lawyers are going to be involved in all of this. They're making a lot of bank on these deals. And Procter & Gamble, which is interesting because actually that's, my father was a career Procter & Gamble guy. So this is, I feel like I have to make this up, but they were actually created the Internet of Things for supply chain tracking, the early RFID chips. And they partnered with MIT in the auto ID lab, create the supply chain tracking, which now we're part of the supply chain. So we're
1 second. You're saying that this will happen, Israel Impact Summit happened in 2019. Do you know which month was it in?
I'd have to look it up. Maybe, I mean, the URL to this is in the record. Like if we,
all right.
So yeah, I'll have to, but often I think they've had several. So this was last year's, that I had information to be able to see who the sponsors were. But let's see, maybe again, the Rothschild Foundation, is part of this, the Innovation Authority. So that's the government innovation. This woman spoke, Naomi Krieger-Carmi. She is connected to this tech hub. That's how I found her, the Bank of Israel, and then these social challenges, right? So the Innovation Authority is going to make money on the social challenges by coming up with impact with, to be the impact nation, right? Like we're the startup nation, impact nation. Social finance was, of course, in this, which is Cohen. Patango is one of the early impact investing funds in Israel. And this woman, Cecile Lilius, I think, she is with these two different investment funds. And she was one of the people who's also talking a lot about Tikkun Olam and impact investing. So anyway, these are the kinds of interests that are, looking to manage poverty. So let me stop this screen, and I might just have one or two more. Let me just see if what else. Share screen. I spend a lot of time making maps.
I see, and actually, they're really good ones. I mean,
okay, this is a big one. Let me try this one. This is the one that kind of connects. So, backstory of this is that I spent some time mapping. There was a city council hearing in Philadelphia, and I believe it was 2016, about using pay for success impact finance around prison reform. And it was really upsetting to me because one of the testimonials that was given as a model of success in sort of reskilling programs was someone who was the head of the Jewish Vocational Services in Philadelphia, was saying that there was a man who was working in facilities staff at a mall, and he was not making enough money to support his family, and he ended up dealing drugs and getting caught and being put in prison. And so after being put in prison, like he was put into a program, like one of these workforce development programs. And then when he got out, he got a new job that was slightly better pay, but only was for 6 months, right? He was only guaranteed this job for 6 months. And they were talking about how this pay for success finance for these reskilling programs for returning citizens, for people who had been incarcerated, were such a good deal. And I thought, it's not actually a good deal when you have a system where people can't make enough money, who are willing to work to support their families, who have to make choices that put them into the judicial system. And then when you supposedly fix them, which will be tied to this impact deal, he's only guaranteed a job for 6 months. Nobody cares what happens to him after the 6 months, right? Yeah. But in those 6 months on the dashboard, he looks good. Yeah. He looks good for the reskilling program, and they can check the box and say, they solved that problem, give me some of that money back. And they can keep the hedge fund game rolling. And we know the hedge fund game is running on essentially a state digital surveillance program that runs on incarceration, but new forms, right? So maybe they're not going to keep you in jail for 5 years, but they'll keep you in it for a while and then put you on a pathway for the impact investors. And They will continue to criminalize poverty, and we're not going to solve poverty. And that really upset me. So, and I actually sent a really ticked off email to the head, the guy who testified with the Jewish Vocational Services. And this is before I really realized the full extent of this. I said, just so you know, some of us know what's going on here, like it's not okay. We actually have to structurally fix the system. So, when we're thinking about the securitization of education debt and reskilling, this is my space, because I've been in the education space for a long time, and Bill Gates is deeply in this space of giving money to remake for a industrially planned, workforce aligned education system that will be planned to feed children into what's called jobs for the future. And this is being tied. So the Gates Foundation is funding these things. Nellie Mae, which is in New England. And it's interesting because now that I think about it, Nellie Mae is focused on New England, but a very major player in this is like the Jewish philanthropy community in Boston. So it's the military and venture capital arm of Boston that is central in New England. And the Israeli consulate in Boston that is a central player in doing this work in Rhode Island. So Nellie Mae, the Lumina Foundation, the Hewlett Packard, remember I was talking about?
Yes.
They're all tied into, we are going to engineer the workforce to the jobs for the future. And the jobs for the future, as we know, are the fourth industrial revolution, which is essentially dehumanizing the whole world and joining us to machines. Now, this program goes way back. And in the US, there are lots of folks, they tend to be on the conservative side, who have lifted up this letter to Hillary Clinton from Mark Tucker. And Mark Tucker was working with the Carnegie Corporation on this planned industrial workforce. And he wrote this letter when the Clintons were coming into office way back, saying, we have this program of apprenticeships and reskilling that we want to pitch for you. This is going to happen. Mark Tucker set this up in the National Center on Education and the Economy in Rochester, New York. And in New York is very important because that's the home of IBM. A lot of this is running on IBM. It's important that people understand that the idea of both tracking demographics, like within the construct of the Holocaust, as also the apartheid past system of South Africa, IBM was central to those programs. And they are central to this new token-based education economic system. So this is all feeding into this. This has been going on the lead up at least 20 years or so, but the technology had to catch up. Down here, we have the income sharing agreements with Mr. Riccardi and the EDLI and the securitization, the CDOs. We remember the Jenga. Those aren't going to be mortgages. Those are going to be toddlers in virtual reality headsets. And then we have Prudential Financial. So Prudential Financial, again, the insurance companies are major players. They're backing these career impact bonds, and they're going to do these advancements, the pathways to economic advancement. So Massachusetts, again, hardcore neoliberal masquerading as social progressivism. They're going to put everyone on workforce pathways and fill the skills gaps with public-private partnerships and pay for success. And the combined Jewish philanthropies of Greater Boston are right in this mix. And the Jewish Vocational Services are right in this mix. And I'm not saying that it's exclusively them. Probably the Catholics have some too. Probably there are some other entities that are playing in this space. But in this case, and I know from listening to this hearing in Philadelphia, that the Jewish Vocational Services are going to be a major player in the Pathways program. So
again, Alison, just to add again, wherever, I know that you, from your perspective, you don't see it as such. You don't see this, you don't see the difference that much between the Jewish people and Zionism or Zionists. And unfortunate for all of us, or fortunate for all of us, there's a difference here. Whoever runs these things are the Zionists, are those who put a lot of money and effort and energy even to create the Holocaust. All right. If you go into history, you see how the Zionist movement had a lot of a big role to play in the Holocaust, working with the Nazis, not against, but working against the Jews or the Jewish people or the Jewish tradition or religion. And it still goes on till today. And even more so, they got, I mean, the Zionist movement and the Zionist money and these dark forces that behind them and behind the royal families and the bankers and all these rich families, their power has grown immensely. And I just want to, again, to make a point that Jewish people are not to blame. The Jewish tradition is not to blame, but some ideas and some concepts have been hijacked by the Zionists and are being used against the Jewish people and against the whole world.
Yeah.
There is wisdom, obviously, in the Bible, in the Jewish tradition, and it's being used against the creation of God. And maybe what I just said is more spiritual in a way, but we need, and I'm saying you and me, but also whoever is listening to this, whoever is trying to understand what's going on in the world right now. And when someone comes to the point that, yes, Jews are behind it, he should stop there and make, again, make some, like, distinguish between Jews and Zionists, or between Judaism, let's say, and Zionism, let's say. And it's really important, because otherwise you fall into the trap of blaming the Jews as the scapegoat. Really, this is what they are by the Zionists, because they use the Jews as the scapegoat. And it's the same system, the same technique that was used in ancient times by the pharaohs, by the Egyptians. And blame the Jews.
I just want to be clear. Like, I have several hundred maps, and these, I have a similarly large map about Notre Dame Business School and the Vatican, right? So today, because of the audience, like, I want to make clear what's happening in the United States and how it links to the people of Israel, because I'm here to try to save all the children, right? I feel like we need to do it for humanity.
I agree.
I want to be clear. This isn't the only map I have. I have many, many maps. And this is a map that I made specifically to link to say, in this cloud-based world, there are pilot projects. And like, just like, and I don't have the slide for the Tanzania one, right? That was a pilot project around maternal health. It was happening through development aid in Tanzania. That has effects. That program probably informed the home visit program in South Carolina, that Pierre Omidyar and his wife Pam are tracking poor women on Medicaid in South Carolina. They have a lot in common, right? We all have, it's global solidarity, right? That's what this is about. But for this, I want to make sure that people, especially since there are 2 social impact bonds in Israel that tie into training and higher education, training people in education, specifically in mathematics and coding, to make this a reality, is that there are impact bonds that are happening in Massachusetts in tandem with people who are integrated with the state of Israel, who will leverage this pilot in ways, and this is what I will show, through Michael Bloomberg and the innovation that is going to be happening through Hazira into these other cities. And there are 12 cities in Israel that are already being targeted for these to be innovated, right? So who's innovating whom? It's very fluid. I mean, clearly, like, IBM is sort of innovating all of us, and Oracle and these big tech companies. But I'm trying to show the relationship and not cast blame. I'm trying to pull back a curtain.
Sure, I know.
I don't even know if many people who are doing this understand what they're doing.
I know.
I would hazard to guess many people who are even pretty near the top of some of this don't actually fully grasp the magnitude of what they've built.
Yeah.
So I will just say, like, and I will close out here, and then we can take some more questions. But so Michael Bloomberg, I keep reiterating, as much as people pay attention to Bill Gates's program, his role, there may be a depopulation component there, but his role in this game is to get us onto the digital tracking system through the vaccine programs. And he's clearly funding a lot of other tech and other things. But he's just phase one. You know, the phase two is living under the global biosecurity state. And that is what Michael Bloomberg's role is. Okay. And right now, Michael Bloomberg in New York State, Governor Cuomo is working to enforce vaccine mandates for the entire population. And that must be understood. And he has asked, Cuomo has asked Eric Schmidt to reimagine, to reimagine New York in this new version, like with the vaccine mandates. And we have to understand that as essentially Cuomo and these interests, these data analytic, looking to deliver under the legacy of Michael Bloomberg's data-driven government, the population of New York State to the hedge funds. Like, it is a symbolic gesture if he is able to accomplish that. So Bloomberg is connected to the World Health Organization, to the climate change, and these are all things. So he has this city leadership initiative at Harvard. They're working on COVID there. They have mayor's challenge money to get the mayors on board of these middle-sized cities. They have government innovations. They have these delivery teams. They're working on Finclusion, financial empowerment, which essentially just means we'll give the poor a tiny bit of money and track how they use it. The What Works Cities program up here, Nudges with the University of Virginia, Healthy Cities. So this partnership for Healthy Cities is about social prescribing, and the Equal Footing Data Portal, right? So they're working on, again, tracking these poverty systems. So this is how it flows through social finance, you know, because Bloomberg Philanthropies is a partner. You know, these workforce reskilling programs flow through Bloomberg, and then they're coming over into, the Hazira program, the innovation here that is just getting started. And it's in partnership with the Perez Center for Innovation, which, as we know, Shemi Perez is not just tech, but also the impact investing. Here's Social Finance Israel. Tel Aviv is one of the participants in that program. The Office of the Portland Trust, which is where Sir Ronald Cohen's, one of his other divisions, is based in Tel Aviv. And so these are the cities. So Beersheba, like, they have an innovation district, and this is all part of this larger cyber directorate and this sort of they actually at Ben Gurion have the Center for Third Sector Social Research. Okay,
Alison, you said there are 12 cities in Israel that
So I don't know if I have all 12. I think they're aiming for 12. These are the ones that I could document. So Beersheba, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Bat Yam,
Akko,
and Ashdod. Can you see this? Are you seeing this on my screen?
No, can you zoom in a bit?
I think that's as close as I can get.
All right.
Yeah. So these are the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think the significant one, so Beersheba, I think, is the biggest one because they've got this whole innovation district going on there.
Yeah, I know.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And the IDF, the tech campus there. So that's the smart city, the new age city, the innovation. But I would say in Jerusalem, another important factor to look at is this Jerusalem Institute for Milken Innovation. So that's Michael Milken, the Milken Institute. That's Enron. That's the crash. The criminal enterprises, right? And they're very much tied to blockchain. So I would really encourage people to look into this Jerusalem Institute Milken Innovation Center, because these tentacles of predatory finance are just woven into everywhere, and they spread across the US and Israel as well. So
again, I'll be more than happy to get some links to these maps, because I can publish them also in the description of the video.
Zooming out. Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so I think this is probably as much as I can't remember. I think I've gone through all the slides now.
Sure. It's a lot. I mean, we've been almost 4 hours. Yeah, it's good.
I told you it was a big piece. You're like, come on. I'm like, no, I have to do it right.
Like, you know what's funny?
But
you know what's funny, Alison, that I'm with you nearly 4 hours, and I have more questions, and I would like to know more. So I think in that sense, your mission was accomplished, because you delivered something really valuable here, but I want to know more. So it's great because this was an appetizer in a way. Although I know you're capable of delivering much more. I know I've seen you on presentations. I wanna thank you again, really, really so much, because what the research you put out is so valuable. It's unbelievable. Look, I mean, this 12 years digging and learning and the hidden, layers of reality, and what you are exposing in this research is just, I don't have words because my vocabulary is so little in English, but I thank you for the bottom of my heart, and everyone who do understand English and watch this video, I think is doing the same, because no one till today, till your research, no one has put this sort of information out there, definitely not in such a way, in such a detailed way. Your work is amazing, Alison, and I told you this in the first talk we had after I watched the Naomi Klein video, and I was like, "You're amazing! How you said it to her, Alison, you are just so great. Really, I thank you so much." And
Well, I
I
appreciate
don't.
the space. I mean,
What?
it's great. I think that the relationship of the United States and the UK and Israel, and the technology and the finance is central.
Yes, I
And
mean, in
people
general,
about the hedge funds. I think that's the thing that I find frustrating, is that people understand the surveillance. They understand some of the control mechanisms, but they're not putting it all together. Like they haven't put it all together yet. So
yeah, and this is where you come in with this research, and it's just amazing. And I promise we'll be in touch. We'll stay in touch. And anyway, please send me the links. Not on Facebook. If you can send it via email, that's better. If it's all right.
yeah.
I prefer not to walk through Facebook. That's it.
I know, right?
And yes.
Well, I think you have the link because I already sent it.
The link to the presentation I have, but if you have specific links to the maps so I can zoom in and zoom out.
Oh, if you use the interactive presentation, there's a link on each map that will open a new tab. If it'll see there's a URL in yellow on each map, I think.
Hang on.
There's
Yes.
at the end. Yeah. So if you click on that link, it should open a new tab with the
I'll do that. I just saw it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
No worries. And I will share the slides. I mean, I will share if it's okay.
Yeah.
To share the link. Yeah, excellent.
I mean, I want to write this up. I mean, it's so many pieces, because I feel like I need to do the Tikkun Olam. Like I need to talk about Estonia. I need to talk about, the Rhode Island connection. Then I need to talk Bloomberg. I could probably write like 10 little pieces on this, but this is at least good to get it in people's minds, I think.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, to be honest,
I'm not pointing fingers, because I know a lot of people are involved. Like a lot of people are in biotech because they believe that what they're doing is going to solve disease, and it may solve some disease, but it actually, if military or other financial interests want to use it to colonize our bodies against our will, then that's something different, and we need people to be willing to stand up for that. And yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, I tell again to the audience, I've watched few presentations by Alison, and you need to watch them, because I have a larger picture than just this presentation. I mean, and you know what I mean, Alison, because you use some other material in other presentations, which I think it's highly valuable to watch others as well. I will put a link to your YouTube, like you asked me to. I will put a link to the YouTube in the description of the video. And God bless us all. Alison McDowell, thank you ever so much.
Oh,
You're
thank
great.
you so much.
Amazing. You're amazing. You're great.
I'm just trying, right? Like, Israel is a big piece. Again, like there's other big pieces. China's a big piece, everything. But all of the things that we are taught to understand about the world, I think we need to be able to unlock and think in different ways. And I think that I'm such an amateur. I think that's why I can do it, because I didn't do it before.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. I keep saying, someone prove me that this isn't happening, because that would make me so happy.
Yeah. We'll stay in touch. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All the best. Thank you guys for staying with us for hours. You're great. Cheers. Take care. God bless.